Welcome to Audiobook Heritage. Today we present 300 Aesop's Fables by Aesop. 300 Aesop's Fables by Aesop. The Lion and the Mouse. Lion was awakened from his sleep by a mouse running across his face. Rising up angrily, he caught the mouse and was about to kill him when the mouse, with great pleading, said, "If you would only spare my life, promise to repay your kindness." The lion laughed and let him go. Not long after, the lion found himself caught by some hunters, who bound him tightly to the ground with strong ropes. The mouse, recognizing his roar, running out of his face, came and gnawed at the ropes with his teeth until the lion was free. The mouse exclaimed, "You once mocked the idea that could ever be of help to you, never expecting to receive anything in return for your kindness. Now you see that even a mouse can provide assistance to a lion." The wolf and the lamb. Wolf, coming across a lamb that had strayed from the fold, decided not to attack him outright, but rather to find a reason to justify to the lamb the wolf's right to eat him. He approached the lamb and addressed him. "Sarah, last year you grossly insulted me," said the wolf. "Indeed," bleated the lamb softly. "You were not even born at that time." The wolf retorted, "You feed in my pasture." "No, good sir," replied the lamb. "I have not yet tasted any grass." Once more, the wolf asserted, "You drink from my well." "No," exclaimed the lamb, "I have never drunk water, for my mother's milk is both food and drink to me." With that, the wolf seized the lamb and devoured him, stating, "Well, won't be left without a meal, even if you deny every one of my accusations. The tyrant will always find a pretext for his tyranny." The ass and the grasshopper. An ass, Netna, having overheard some grasshoppers chirping, Netna was utterly enchanted. Wishing to possess their charming melodies, Netna, he inquired about the kind of food that gave them such beautiful voices. They answered, "The dew." The ass made a resolution to live solely on dew, and before long, Netna, he perished from hunger. The wolf and the crane. Netna, wolf had a bone lodged in his throat, hired a crane for a substantial fee to reach into his mouth and pull out the bone. Once the crane successfully extracted it and asked for her payment, the wolf, Netna, grinning and baring his teeth, replied, "Surely you've received enough reward just for being able to safely withdraw your head from the mouth and jaws of a wolf. When serving the wicked, do not expect a reward. Do not expect a reward. And consider yourself fortunate if you escape unscathed for your efforts." The father and his sons. Father had a group of sons who were always quarreling with one another. After his attempts to resolve their disputes through words failed, Netna, he decided to provide them with a practical demonstration of the perils of discord. One day, Netna, he instructed them to bring him a bundle of sticks. Once they gathered the sticks, he had narrowly escaped death twice. The lesson here is clear, he thought. Sometimes one's survival depends on quick thinking and the ability to adapt. However, he also understood that such deception could only last for so long, and that eventually he might encounter someone who would see through his ruse. The bat decided to stay vigilant, knowing that it was not wise to disguise oneself for too long, especially when faced with cunning predators like the weasels. In the end, the bat's experiences served as a reminder that in a world filled with adversaries, it's important to be both clever and cautious. The bat assured him that he was not a mouse, but a bat, and managed to escape once again. It is wise to make the most of circumstances. The cock and the jewel. One day, a cock was scratching for food for himself and his hens when he discovered a precious stone. He exclaimed, If your owner had found you instead of me, he would have taken you in and placed you in your rightful place, but have found you for no good purpose. Would much rather have a single barleycorn than all the jewels in the world. ... The Swallow and the Crow. The Swallow and the Crow had a dispute over their plumage. ... The Crow settled the argument by saying, ... Your feathers look beautiful in the spring. ... But mine protect me against the winter. ... Indeed, friends who only appear in fair weather are not worth much. ... The kingdom of the lion. In the realm of the field and forest, the beasts had a lion as their king. ... He was neither angry nor cruel. ... Nor tyrannical. He was as just and gentle as a king could be. During his reign, ... he issued a royal proclamation calling for a grand assembly of all the birds and beasts. He laid out plans for a universal alliance. ... Were the wolf and the lamb, ... the panther and the kid, ... the tiger and the stag, ... the dog and the hare could coexist in perfect peace and friendship. The hare exclaimed, "Oh, ... how have longed for this day when the weak can stand beside the strong without fear." And right after saying this, ... he darted away, running for his life. The traveler and his dog Traveler, preparing to set out on his journey, ... noticed his dog standing at the door, ... stretching, ... He snapped at him, ... "Why are you just standing there, ... staring? Everything is ready but you, ... so come with me right away." The dog, wagging his tail, responded, "Oh, master, I am quite ready, it's you waiting on." It's often the loiterer who blames his delays on his more active companion. The ants and the grasshopper. The ants were enjoying a fine winter's day, busy drying the grain they had gathered during the summertime. As the race progressed, the tortoise kept moving steadily forward, never wavering in his determination. Meanwhile, the hare, confident in his speed, took a long nap, convinced he had more than enough time to catch up later. When he finally awoke, he realized the tortoise was approaching the finish line. In a panic, he sprinted as fast as he could, but it was too late. The tortoise crossed the finish line first, proving that slow and steady truly wins the race. The moral of the story: consistency and perseverance often triumph over arrogance and haste. "Wait, don't touch me," may look like what you're after, but I'm far more dangerous than a locust. The boy, realizing his mistake, quickly pulled his hand back, understanding that not everything that appears attractive is safe. The moral of the story: be cautious, for appearances can be deceiving. The Fox and the Grapes. Hungry Fox was wandering through the woods when he came across a vine heavy with ripe grapes. He stretched his neck and jumped to reach them, but they were just out of his grasp. After several attempts to get the juicy treats, he finally gave up in frustration. "Those grapes are probably sour anyway," he muttered to himself as he walked away. The moral of the story: it's easy to despise what you cannot have. The Lion and the Mouse. Mighty Lion was once sleeping in the forest when a little mouse accidentally ran over his paw. The lion awoke, furious, and caught the mouse with his huge paw. The terrified mouse begged for mercy, saying, "Please let me go. One day you will help me in return." The lion laughed at the idea, but decided to let the tiny creature go. Days later, the lion was caught in a hunter's net. The mouse, hearing his roars, rushed to help. He chewed through the ropes until the lion was free. "You see," said the mouse, "even the smallest friend can be a great help." The moral of the story: kindness is never wasted, and true strength can come in unexpected forms. If you had just touched me, my friend, you would have lost me and all of your locusts as well. Once, Regad, hearing his roars, rushed to help. You see, even the smallest friend can be a great help. The moral of the story: kindness is never wasted, and true strength can come in unexpected forms. If you had just touched me, my friend, you would have lost me and all of your locusts as well. Once, for when the lion was caught in a hunter's net, the mouse begged for mercy, saying, "Even the smallest friend can be a great help." The moral of the story: kindness is never wasted, and true strength can come in unexpected forms. If you had just touched me, my friend, you would have lost me and all of your locusts as well. Once, for when the lion was caught in a hunter's net, the mouse begged for mercy, saying, "Even the smallest friend can." There was a skilled fisherman who was also a musician. He took his flute and nets down to the seashore, standing on a projecting rock, several tunes, hoping that the fish would be drawn in by the melody and, of their own accord, dance into his net below. After waiting patiently for a long time, with no fish responding to his music, he finally set aside his flute. He cast his net into the sea and ended up with an excellent haul of fish. As he watched them flopping about in the net atop the rock, he remarked, "Oh, you most perverse creatures, when played my flute, you wouldn't dance, but now that I've stopped, you do so merrily. Now, let me share the story of the dog and the shadow." Dog was crossing a bridge over a stream with a piece of flesh in his mouth. As he glanced down at the water, he saw his own shadow reflected in the surface and mistook it for that of another dog, who seemed to have a piece of meat twice the size of his own. Greedily tempted, he let go of his own meat and lunged at the shadow to snatch the larger piece. In his folly, he ended up losing both his meat and the illusion of the bigger prize. That is not a pebble, my dear. It is frankincense, a fragrant resin. The young mole stubbornly insisted. "No, I can see it clearly. It's a pebble." Frustrated, the mother mole decided to demonstrate further. She placed a sprig of thyme in front of him and asked again, "And what about this?" He answered confidently, "That is just a little twig." His mother sighed, knowing that as a creature without sight, he could never truly understand, and wisdom often comes from listening to others, rather than relying solely on our limited understanding. "My son, fear that you are not only blind, but that you have also lost your sense of smell." After a long and fruitless search, he vowed that if he could only discover the thief who had stolen the calf, he would offer a lamb in sacrifice to Hermes, Pan, and the guardian deities of the forest. Not long afterward, as he ascended a small hillock, he saw at its foot a lion feeding on the calf. Terrified at the sight, he lifted his eyes and hands to heaven and said, "The herdsman and the lost bull." Once upon a time, a herdsman tending to his flock deep within a forest lost a bull calf from his fold. After a long, fruitless search, he made a vow. If he could discover who had stolen his calf, he would offer a lamb in sacrifice to Hermes, Pan, and the guardian deities of the forest. Not long after, as he climbed a small hillock, he caught sight of a lion at its foot, feeding on the very calf he had lost. Terrified at the horrifying scene, he lifted his eyes and hands to the heavens and said, "Just now vowed to offer a lamb to the guardian deities of the forest, if could only find out who had robbed me. But now that have discovered the thief, would willingly offer a full-grown bull in exchange for the calf have lost, if could only secure my own escape from him in safety." The fawn and his mother. Young fawn once approached his mother and said, "You are larger than a dog, swifter, and more accustomed to running quickly. You even have your horns for defense. Why, then, dear mother, do the hounds frighten you so?" She smiled gently and replied, "I know full well, my son, that what you say is true. I possess the advantages you mention, but when hear even the bark of a single dog, I feel ready to faint and flee as fast as my legs will carry me." The truth is, no amount of reasoning will instill courage in the coward. The ass, the fox, and the lion. The ass and the fox, having joined forces for their mutual protection, ventured into the forest to hunt. They hadn't gone far when they encountered a lion. The fox, recognizing the looming danger, approached the lion and promised to help him capture the ass, provided that the lion vowed not to harm him. After assuring the ass that he would be safe, the fox led him to a deep pit, setting the stage for the trap. Once the lion saw that the ass was caught, he swiftly seized the fox and leisurely turned his attention to the ass. In another tale, a group of flies were drawn to a jar of honey that had been accidentally spilled in a housekeeper's room. They eagerly dipped their feet into it and indulged themselves, but soon found that their feet were so sticky with honey that they couldn't use their wings to escape. Tragically, they became trapped and suffocated. As they were perishing, they lamented, "Oh, how foolish we are! For the sake of a momentary pleasure, we have brought our own destruction." Indeed, verse so, pleasure that comes at a cost only leads to suffering. Controversy erupted among the beasts of the field regarding which animal deserved the most credit for producing the largest number of offspring at one time. They clamored into the presence of the lioness, demanding her judgment on the matter. "And you," they asked, and brought, "how many cubs do you have at a birth?" The lioness laughed and replied, "Why? Why? The lioness laughed and replied, "Why, have only one, but that one is a genuine lion. The value lies in quality, not quantity." One winter, a farmer discovered a snake frozen and stiff from the cold. Out of compassion, he picked it up and placed it in his bosom, hoping to warm it back to life. With the warmth, the snake quickly revived and, reverting to its natural instincts, bit the farmer, delivering a mortal wound. "Oh, oh," cried the farmer with his last breath, "you deserve this for being kind to a scoundrel. The greatest kindness cannot bind the ungrateful." Man and a lion journeyed together through the forest. The cranes begged for their freedom, pleading their innocence. "We are only here to eat the seeds," they argued. Just then, a stork happened to arrive and found himself caught in the same nets. Hearing the crane's pleas, he chimed in, "You came to my fields with ill intent and must face the consequences." Thus, the stork soon learned that associating with the wrong crowd can lead to one's downfall. In the end, thus, the farmer's nets caught not only the cranes, but also the innocent stork. The lesson is clear. Choose your companions wisely, for they may lead you to trouble. With them, freedom. Sometimes. He caught a stork that had injured its leg in the net and was desperately pleading with the farmer to spare its life. "Please, please, kind sir," the stork implored, "let me go free this once. My broken limb should evoke your compassion. Besides, I am not a crane. I am a stork, the bird of good character. Look how care for my parents, and just look at my feathers. They are nothing like those of a crane." The farmer chuckled and replied, "That may be true, but all I know is that caught you alongside these robbers, the cranes. And you must face the same fate as them. Birds of a feather flock together." In another tale, a mountain was once in great turmoil. Loud groans and noises echoed, attracting crowds from all around, all eager to discover what was amiss. Just as they gathered in anxious anticipation of some dreadful disaster, out came a mouse. "Oh, don't make a fuss over nothing. Oh, if only had listened to the wisdom of my own nature." The eagle had granted her desire, but the cost was far more than she had bargained for. The fox and the grapes. Fox, salmon said, came upon a vine laden with ripe grapes hanging high on the vine. He jumped and jumped, straining to reach the luscious fruit, but despite his efforts, he could not grasp them. Frustrated, he finally sat back and declared, "What a fool I am, for trying to reach those sour grapes. They are probably not worth eating anyway. The Lion and the Mouse. Lion lay asleep in his den when a little mouse accidentally ran across his nose. Roused from his slumber, the lion caught the mouse with his great paw and was about to eat him. The poor mouse pleaded, "Please, let me go. Promise that one day will repay your kindness." The lion, amused by the idea of a tiny mouse helping him, released him. Some days later, the lion found himself caught in a hunter's net. The mouse, hearing his roars of frustration, hurried to his aid and gnawed through the ropes, freeing the mighty lion. "You see," said the mouse, "even the smallest friend can be of great help." These fables remind us of the value of humility, gratitude, and the unexpected friendships that can arise in times of need. Have earned my current fate. "Aw, man, for what business do you have with wings and clouds, when can barely move about on the earth?" If men had all they desired, they would often find themselves ruined. One day, a fox fell into a deep well and couldn't find a way to escape. Soon after, a goat, driven by thirst, approached the same well and caught the fox. Asked if the water was good. Hiding his dire situation behind a cheerful facade, the fox lavishly praised the water, claiming it was excellent beyond measure, and encouraged the goat to come down. The goat, solely focused on quenching his thirst, leapt down without a second thought. Just as he began to drink, the fox revealed the trouble they were both in and proposed a plan for their mutual escape. "If," said he, "you place your front hooves on the wall and lower your head, I'll climb up your back and get out. Once I'm free, I'll help you out too." The goat readily agreed, and the fox jumped onto his back. Steadying himself with the goat's horns, the fox managed to reach the mouth of the well and quickly made his escape. When the goat scolded him for breaking his promise, the fox turned back and shouted, "You foolish old fellow. If you had as many brains in your head as you have hairs in your beard, look before you leap. Now, let me tell you about the raven and the swan." Raven once saw a swan and envied its beautiful plumage. Believing that the swan's magnificent white color came from swimming in the clean waters, the raven abandoned the nearby altars where he usually found his food and moved to the lakes and pools. Despite his efforts to cleanse his feathers, he found he couldn't change their color. Ultimately, due to lack of food, he perished. This teaches us that changing our habits cannot alter our true nature. The thirsty pigeon. Once, a thirsty pigeon, desperate for water, spotted a goblet painted on a signboard. Mistaking it for a real source of refreshment, she flew toward it with a loud flap of her wings, only to crash painfully into the sign. The impact broke her wings, sending her tumbling to the ground, where she was swiftly caught by a bystander. This story reminds us that enthusiasm must be tempered with caution. The dog in the manger. In a barn, a dog lay lazily in a manger, growling and snapping to keep the oxen from enjoying the hay that had been set out for them. One of the oxen turned to his companions and remarked, "What a selfish dog. He can't eat the hay himself, yet he won't let those who can enjoy it either." The oxen and the axle trees. Heavy wagon was being pulled down a country lane by a team of oxen. As the axle trees groaned and creaked under the weight, the oxen turned to the wheels and called out, "Hey there, why are you making such a fuss? We bear all the labor, and we, not you, ought to cry out." Those who suffer the most often complain the least. The farmer and the cranes. Some cranes made their feeding grounds on plowlands that had just been sown with wheat. For a long time, the farmer chased them away with an empty sling, instilling terror with his futile threats. However, when the birds realized that the sling was merely waved in the air without any real consequence, they ignored him and refused to leave. Seeing this, the farmer loaded his sling with stones and ended up killing a significant number of them. The remaining cranes quickly abandoned his fields, saying to one another, "It's time for us to head to Lilliput. This man isn't satisfied with just scaring us anymore. He's starting to show us just how serious he really is. If words do not suffice, actions must follow." The sick lion, struggling with old age and ailments that prevented him from catching food through force, decided to resort to cunning instead. The other marshaled them. Farewell. Seeing the bear approaching, didn't know what to do. He had heard that bears could sense fear, so he decided to lie down on the ground and hold his breath, pretending to be dead. The bear came close, sniffed him, and after a moment, lost interest and wandered away. When the bear had gone, the man in the tree climbed down and asked his friend, "What did the bear whisper to you?" The other man replied, "He didn't whisper anything. He just told me to beware of friends who would abandon me in times of danger." This story reminds us that true friends stand by us in our darkest hours, while those who flee aren't worth our trust. The other man, realizing he was about to be attacked, fell flat on the ground. When the bear approached, sniffing him with its snout and examining him all over, he held his breath and pretended to be dead as best as he could. The bear soon lost interest and wandered away, as it is said that bears will not touch a dead body. Once the bear was gone, the man in the tree climbed down and jokingly asked his friend what the bear had whispered in his ear. "He gave me this advice," his companion replied. "Never travel with a friend who deserts you in the face of danger." Misfortune truly tests the sincerity of friends. In another tale, there was a fox who, caught in a trap, managed to escape but lost his tail in the process. Feeling burdened by the shame and ridicule he faced without his tail, he plotted to convince all the other foxes that being tailless was far more attractive, trying to make up for his own loss, which he insisted was a great inconvenience. One fox interrupted him, saying, "If you hadn't lost your tail yourself, my friend, you wouldn't advise us to do this." The cock-cat caught a cock and pondered how to rationalize eating him. He accused the cock of being a nuisance to people by crowing at night and disturbing their sleep. The cock defended himself, explaining that he crowed for the benefit of men so they could rise in time for their morning tasks. The cat replied, "Though you have plenty of clever excuses, won't go without my supper." And he made a meal of the cock. The wolf in sheep's clothing. Once upon a time, a wolf decided to disguise his appearance to secure food more easily. Once upon a time, a wolf decided to disguise himself in order to catch food more easily. Wrapped in a sheep's skin, he mingled with the flock, fooling the shepherd with his clever disguise. As evening fell, the shepherd rounded up the sheep and secured them safely in the fold for the night. The gate was locked, and the entrance was tightly secured. However, later that night, when the shepherd returned to the fold to prepare meat for the next day, he mistakenly grabbed the wolf instead of a sheep, and without hesitation, he killed him instantly. You seek harm, you will find harm. Now, let me tell you about the goat herd and the goat. Goatherd was searching desperately for a stray goat that had wandered off from the flock. He whistled and blew his horn to call it back. But the straggler didn't pay him any mind. Finally, in frustration, the goatherd threw a stone and broke one of the goat's horns. Then he pleaded with the goat not to inform his master. The goat responded, "Eight of you foolish fellow. The horn will give away the truth even if remain silent. Remember, you cannot conceal what is destined to be revealed." The boasting traveler man who had traveled to foreign lands returned to his homeland, boasting extravagantly about the many wonderful and heroic feats he claimed to have performed during his journeys. Among his many tales, he recounted that while he was in Rhodes, he leapt such a great distance that no one in his time could come close to matching it. He confidently declared that there were many witnesses in Rhodes who had seen his remarkable leap and could vouch for his extraordinary claim. However, one of the bystanders interrupted him, saying, "Now, my good man, if this is all true, there's no need for witnesses. Let's suppose this is Rhodes. You leap for us now." The lion in Love Lion sought to marry the daughter of a woodcutter. The father, torn between granting the lion's request and fearing the consequences of outright rejection, devised a plan to rid himself of the lion's persistent advances. He expressed his willingness to accept the lion as a suitor for his daughter, but only on one condition. The lion gladly agreed to this condition. However, when the toothless and clawless lion returned to pursue his intentions, the woodcutter, no longer intimidated, attacked him with his club and chased him back into the forest. The miser sold everything he owned to buy a single lump of gold, which he buried in a hole beside an old wall, visiting it daily just to admire his treasure. One of his workers noticed his frequent trips to this spot and grew curious enough to keep an eye on him. Soon, he uncovered the secret of the hidden treasure. Digging down, he found the lump of gold and stole it. When the miser returned on his next visit, he discovered the hole was empty. Overcome with grief, he began to tear his hair and wail loudly. Neighbor, noticing his distress and learning what had happened, said, "Please, don't be so upset. Instead, take a stone and place it in the hole, and imagine the gold is still there. It will serve you just as well, for when the gold was there, you never made use of it." The porker, the sheep, and the goat. Once upon a time, a young pig found himself confined in a fold yard alongside a goat and a sheep. One day, the shepherd grabbed hold of him, and the pig squealed, grunted, and struggled fiercely to escape. The sheep and the goat, observing his distress, complained, "Why do you make such a fuss when he handles us? We don't make a sound." To this, the pig responded, "Your experiences and mine are far from the same. He catches you for your wool or your milk. But for me, he has a much graver intention, my very life." The boy and the filberts. Boy once reached into a pitcher filled with filberts. He grabbed as many as his hand could hold, but when he tried to pull his hand out, he found it stuck in the narrow neck of the pitcher. Desperate not to part with his precious filberts, he became distressed, bursting into tears and lamenting his predicament. Bystanders said to him, "Be satisfied with half the quantity, and you will easily draw your hand out. Don't attempt too much at once." The frogs asking for a king. The frogs, distressed by their lack of a stable ruler, sent ambassadors to Jupiter, pleading for a king. Recognizing their simplicity, he dropped a massive log into the lake. The frogs were frightened by the splash it made and quickly dove into the depths of the pond. However, once they realized the enormous log was still and motionless, they mustered their courage, resurfaced, and began to sit on it with disdain. But after a while, they began to feel mistreated by such an inactive ruler and sent a second delegation to Jupiter, pleading for a different sovereign. In response, he gave them an eel to govern them. When the frogs noted his laid-back demeanor, they sent yet another request to Jupiter, asking him to choose yet another king for them. Jupiter, Robert, unhappy with their incessant complaints, Jupiter decided to send a heron, which began to prey on the frogs one by one until none were left to croak by the lake. Now, let me share the tale of the laborer and the snake. Snake had made its burrow close to the porch of a humble cottage, and it inflicted a fatal bite on the cottager's infant son. Overcome with sorrow, the father vowed to kill the snake. The following day, as the snake slithered out of its hole in search of food, the cottager seized his axe. In his haste, however, he missed the snake's head and only managed to sever the tip of its tail. In time, the cottager grew anxious that the snake might strike at him next, so he attempted to make amends by placing some bread and salt at the entrance of the burrow. The snake, hissing slightly, replied, "There can be no peace between us. For each time see you, I will remember the loss of my tail, and whenever you set eyes on me, you will be reminded of the terrible loss of your son's death. Indeed, oh, no one truly forgets the wounds inflicted by those who have caused them." The lion, the mouse, and the fox. One hot summer day, a lion, weary from the heat, fell into a deep sleep in his den. Little Mouse scurried across his mane and ears, unintentionally waking him from his slumber. Furious, the lion rose and shook himself vigorously, searching every nook and cranny of his den for the mouse. Just then, a fox happened by and chuckled. "What a mighty lion you are, terrified of a mere mouse." "It's not the mouse fear," replied the lion with a growl. "It's his uninvited familiarity and bad manners that irk me. Indeed, little liberties can be great offenses." The horse and the groom. There was once a groom who would spend entire days carefully curry-combing and grooming his horse. Yet, despite his attention, he was also stealing the horse's oats to sell for his own gain. "Oh, woe is me," sighed the horse. "If you truly want me to be in tip-top shape, you should tend to my grooming less and feed me more." The ass and the mule. Muleteer set off on a journey, driving ahead of him an ass and a mule, both heavily laden. The ass carried his load with ease as long as he traveled along the flat plains. But as soon as he began to climb the steep mountain path, then he found his burden far too heavy to bear. He pleaded with the mule to lighten his load just a little so he could carry the rest home. However, the mule paid no mind to his request. The ass collapsed and died under the weight. In that wild and desolate area, the muleteer had no choice but to add the ass's load to that of the mule. Then, and to top it all off, he placed the skin of the ass on the already burdened mule after having skinned him. Groaning under the heavy load, the mule thought to himself, "I'm getting exactly what deserve." If only had been willing to help the ass a little bit during his time of need, wouldn't now be carrying not only his burden, but him as well. The ass and the lapdog. There was once a man who owned an ass and a remarkably beautiful Maltese lapdog. The ass was kept in a stable, where he had an ample supply of oats and hay, just like any other donkey would. Meanwhile, the lapdog was a delightful little Maltese, known for his impressive tricks, and he was adored by his master. The man would often lavish affection on the lapdog, and he rarely went out to dinner without bringing back some tasty morsel for him. In stark contrast, the ass had a heavy workload, grinding corn at the mill and hauling wood from the forest or carrying burdens from the farm. He frequently lamented his difficult fate, comparing it to the luxury and leisure enjoyed by the lapdog. One fateful day, in a fit of frustration, the ass broke free from his ropes and halter, bursting into his master's house in a wild display of excitement. He kicked up his heels, pranced around, and tried to frolic as best as he could. In his attempt to mimic the lapdog, he leaped around the table but instead ended up breaking it and sending all the dishes crashing to the floor. Undeterred, he then tried to lick his master and jumped onto his back. The servants, hearing the strange commotion and sensing their master's peril, quickly came to his aid, driving the ass back to his stable with kicks, clubs, and cuffs. As the beaten ass returned to his stall, Nearly at death's door, nearly at death's door, he lamented. I have brought this upon myself. Why couldn't have been content to toil alongside my companions, instead of wishing to lounge about all day like that useless little lapdog? Once upon a time, the oxen, they conspired to rid themselves of the butchers, whose trade was detrimental to their kind. They gathered one day to execute their plan, and dashed sharpening their horns for the fight. However, one very old ox, who had plowed many a field, spoke up. It is true that these butchers slaughter us, but they do so with skillful hands and cause us no unnecessary pain. If we rid ourselves of them, we may fall into the grasp of unskilled operators and suffer a far worse fate. Why are you doing this? We have done nothing to you. The boys, amused by the frog's plight, only laughed harder and continued their cruel game. The frogs, frightened and helpless, they could only dive deeper into the safety of the water. But soon one wise frog emerged once more and said, Please, this is not a game. Your laughter might bring you joy now. But remember, it only takes a small shift in power for the tables to turn. The boys paused for a moment, contemplating this warning, but their youthful mischief urged them to continue. As they threw more stones, they kept failing to recognize that cruelty, once unleashed, often circles back. Thus, beware of the consequences of your actions. Even the smallest beings have their own struggles and deserve respect. Pray stop. My boys. What is sport to you? Is death to us. The salt merchant and his ass peddler drove his ass to the seashore to buy salt. His way home crossed a stream. Making a false step. The ass accidentally fell in and emerged with a much lighter load. As the water had dissolved part of the sack, the peddler retraced his steps and filled his panniers with an even larger quantity of salt than before. When he reached the stream once more, the ass purposely fell down in the same spot, getting back on his feet with the weight of his load significantly reduced. He brayed triumphantly, as if he had achieved what he wanted. The peddler saw through his trick and took him back to the coast, this time buying a cargo of sponges instead of salt. Once again, the foolish ass fell down on purpose when he reached the stream. But this time, the sponges absorbed water, greatly increasing the weight of his load. Thus, his trick backfired, and he found himself carrying a double burden. The mischievous dog once. There was a dog who would sneak up quietly behind everyone he encountered and bite them unexpectedly. His master decided to attach a bell around his neck, so he would announce his presence wherever he went. The dog, thinking the bell was a sign of distinction, became proud of it and began to jingle it around the marketplace. One day, an older hound approached him and said, "So why do you make such a spectacle of yourself? That bell you wear isn't a mark of honor, but rather a badge of disgrace, a public signal for everyone to steer clear of you as a well-mannered dog. It's a common mistake to confuse notoriety with fame." The goatherd and the wild goats. One evening, a goatherd was herding his flock home when he discovered some wild goats mingling among them. He decided to keep them together with his own goats for the night. The following day, a heavy snowfall struck, preventing him from taking the herd to their regular feeding grounds, forcing him to keep them all penned up. He provided just enough food for his own goats to sustain them, while he generously fed the wild goats, hoping that by doing so, they would choose to stay and become part of his flock. When the snow melted, he led them all out to graze. But the wild goats quickly dashed away to the mountains, Upset, the goatherd scolded them for their ingratitude, lamenting how he had cared for them more than his own goats during the storm. One of the wild goats turned back and replied, "That's exactly why we're so wary. If you treated us better than your own longtime goats yesterday, it's clear that if new goats were to come after us, you would favor them too. This demonstrates that old friendships should not be sacrificed for new ones." The man and his two sweethearts, middle-aged man, blank, 6 section, whose hair was starting to gray, found himself in a romantic predicament, as he was courting 2 women simultaneously. One was youthful, full of life, while the other was older and more experienced. In pain from the sting, he cried out, and his mother rushed to his side. She advised him to be cautious in the future, blank, blank, warning him to avoid the nettles that had caused him such distress. Yet, in a moment of youthful rebellion, the boy decided to engage with the nettles once more, ignoring his mother's wisdom. He learned the hard way that some things are best left alone, realizing that heedlessness often leads to unnecessary suffering. Thus, he understood that it's wise to listen to the lessons that life and our elders, and middle-aged man whose hair was starting to gray, found himself in a romantic predicament, as he was courting 2 women simultaneously. One was youthful, full of life, while the other was older and more experienced. And pain from the sting is irrefuelable poison. Never touched it lightly, and it will feel as soft as silk against your hand. Whatever you do, do it with all your strength. An astronomer would venture out at night to gaze at the stars. One evening, completely absorbed in the night sky as he strolled through the suburbs, he accidentally fell into a deep well. While he mourned his injuries and cried out for help, a neighbor came by. Upon discovering what had happened, the neighbor said, "Listen, my friend, while you're busy trying to uncover the mysteries of the heavens, why not pay attention to what's happening right here on earth? The wolves and the sheep. Why must there always be fear and slaughter between us?" The wolves asked the sheep. "Those evil dogs have a lot to answer for. They always bark whenever we approach you and attack us before we've done any harm. If you would only send them away, there might soon be treaties of peace and reconciliation between us." The poor, silly sheep were easily deceived and dismissed the dogs. As a result, the wolves had their way with the unguarded flock, attacking them with impunity. The cat and the birds. One day, a cat learned that the birds in a particular aviary were unwell. Donning the guise of a physician, he grabbed his cane and a bag of medical instruments appropriate for his supposed profession and set off to pay them a visit. He knocked on the door and asked the inhabitants how they were faring, saying that if they were ill, he would be more than happy to prescribe treatment and help them recover. They replied, "We are all very well, and we would like to remain so, if you could kindly go away and leave us be." The vain jackdaw, it is said, decided to establish a ruler over the birds and announced that on a certain day they should all gather before him, where he would choose the most beautiful among them to be king. A jackdaw, aware of his own lack of charm, scoured the woods and fields, collecting feathers that had fallen from his fellow birds. He adorned himself with these, hoping to present himself as the most beautiful of all. When the appointed day arrived and the birds had assembled before Jupiter, the jackdaw appeared in his colorful display of feathers. But when Jupiter proposed to make him king because of the beauty of his plumage, the other birds protested indignantly. One by one, they plucked their own feathers from him, leaving the jackdaw with nothing but his original self. The kid and the wolf, young kid standing safely on the roof of a house, spotted a wolf passing by and couldn't resist the urge to mock him. "Hey, wolf," he called out, tauntingly. The wolf looked up and replied, "You may think you're clever, but it's not you hearing. It's the roof you're standing on." This encounter shows us that sometimes the weak can take advantage of the strong, especially when the circumstances favor them. The old woman and the physician, an elderly woman, having lost her sight, sought the help of a physician to restore her vision. They made a deal in front of witnesses. If he managed to cure her blindness, he would receive a payment. but if she remained blind, she would owe him nothing. With this agreement in place, the physician visited her time and time again, applying his treatment, but also gradually stealing her possessions little by little during each visit. Once he had taken everything she had, he finally cured her and now demanded the payment they had agreed upon. The old woman, upon regaining her sight and realizing that her home was now devoid of any belongings, refused to pay him a dime. The physician pressed his claim, and when she remained obstinate, he summoned her to appear before the judge. Standing in court, the old woman spoke. "This man states the truth regarding our agreement. He promised to pay in the sum of money if regained my sight. However, the word my sight was to owe him nothing if remained blind. He now asserts that I'm healed, but maintain that I'm still blind. When lost my sight, I could see various possessions and valuable goods in my home, but now, despite his claims of my restoration, cannot see a single item. Meanwhile, from there, right now, an ox was drinking at a pond when it inadvertently stepped on a nest of young frogs, crushing one beneath its weight. The mother frog, noticing a missing offspring, approached the other frogs and questioned them about what had happened. He is dead, dear mother. Just now a very large beast with 4 great legs came to the pond and crushed him to death with its cloven hoof." The mother frog, puffing herself up in disbelief, asked, "Very well, was the beast really that big?" "Please, mother, stop puffing yourself up," said her son, "and don't be angry. I assure you, you'd be more likely to burst than to successfully imitate the size of that monster. Now, let me tell you about a farmer and his sons. Father, nearing death, often sends tender steps out of bedding. He called them to his bedside and said, 'My sons, there is a great treasure hidden in one of my vineyards.' After his passing, the sons took their shovels and pickaxes, diligently digging through every part of their land. They found no treasure, but the hard work they invested was rewarded with an extraordinary and abundant crop from the vines, the heifer and the ox. Once, a heifer observed an ox toiling away, yoked to a plow, and couldn't help but taunt him about his unfortunate fate of being forced to work. Soon after, during the harvest festival, owner released the ox from his yoke, but instead, bound the heifer with ropes and led her away to the altar for sacrifice in honor of the occasion. The ox, witnessing this, turned to the heifer with a knowing smile and said, 'You see, this is why you were allowed to live in idleness, because now you are to be sacrificed.' The fighting cocks and the eagle. In another tale, 2 game cocks were locked in a fierce battle for supremacy over the farmyard. Eventually, the fighting cocks and the eagle. One managed to drive the other away. The defeated cock slunk off to hide in a quiet corner, while the victorious one fluttered up to a high wall, spreading his wings and crowing triumphantly at the top of his lungs. But as fate would have it, an eagle soaring overhead swooped down and carried him off in its talons. The vanquished cock immediately emerged from his hiding place and ruled thereafter with undisputed mastery. Pride goes before destruction. The charger and the miller charger, feeling the infirmities of age, was sent to work in a mill instead of going out to battle. But as he was compelled to grind grain instead of serving in the wars, he lamented his change of fortune. He reminisced about his former glory, saying, "Bah, miller, once charged into battle, fully armored from head to tail, with a groom attending to me, and now cannot comprehend why ever preferred the mill over the battlefield." "Do not dwell on the past," the miller replied, "for it is the common fate of mortals to endure the fluctuations of fortune. The fox and the monkey. Once, a monkey performed a dance that captivated an assembly of beasts. So impressed were they by his performance that they unanimously elected him their king. Fox, envious of the honor bestowed upon the monkey, stumbled upon a piece of meat hidden in a trap. Leading the monkey to the spot, she claimed to have discovered a treasure meant for him, a hidden bounty of his kingdom, and encouraged him to seize it. The monkey approached carelessly and soon found himself caught in the trap. When he accused the fox of deliberately leading him into danger, she responded, "Oh, monkey, how can you, with such foolishness, ever expect to be king over the beasts?" Now, as for the horse and his rider, Cavalry Soldier took great care of his steed. Throughout the war, he regarded his horse as a trusted companion in all challenges, feeding him carefully with hay and corn. However, when the conflict ended, his attitude changed. The soldier began to feed the horse nothing but chaff and burdened him with heavy loads of wood, subjecting him to relentless toil and harsh treatment. War was once again declared, and when the trumpet called him to arms, the soldier adorned his horse with its military gear and mounted, donning his heavy coat of mail. However, the horse immediately collapsed under the weight, no longer able to bear the burden. It spoke to its master, saying, "You must now go to war on foot, for you have transformed me from a horse into a donkey. How can you expect me to switch back to being a horse in an instant?" Meanwhile, the members of the body rose in rebellion against the belly, declaring, "Why should we endlessly toil to fulfill your needs, while you do nothing but lounge in luxury and indulge yourself?" The members executed their plan and refused to support the belly. As a result, the entire body quickly weakened, and the hands, feet, mouth, and eyes, realizing their mistake too late, regretted their foolish actions. The widow and her little maidens. There was a widow who took great pleasure in cleaning, and she had 2 little maidens to assist her. Every morning, a break of dawn, she would wake them up with the crowing of the rooster. Annoyed by the relentless early hours, the maidens decided to take matters into their own hands and resolved to kill the rooster who disturbed their sleep. However, after they followed through with their plan, they soon realized that they had only invited more trouble upon themselves. No longer hearing the rooster's call, their mistress now woke them up in the middle of the night to begin their work. The vine and the goat. Once there was a thriving vine, full of lush leaves and ripe grapes during the time of vintage. One day, a goat happened to pass by and began nibbling on its tender tendrils and leaves. The vine, feeling hurt, spoke up, "Why are you harming me without reason and devouring my leaves? Is there no fresh grass to be found? But shall not have to wait long for my rightful revenge. For if you were to strip my leaves and cut me down to my roots, you will provide the wine that will be poured over you when you are led as a sacrifice." Jupiter and the monkey. Jupiter issued a decree to all the creatures of the forest, promising a royal reward for the one whose offspring was deemed the most handsome. The monkey joined the others and, with all the tenderness of a mother, presented a flat-nosed, hairless, and awkwardly featured young monkey as a contender for the prize. The moment she introduced her son, was met with a chorus of laughter. Undeterred, she proclaimed, "We may not know whether Jupiter will choose my son for the prize, but do know that in my eyes, as his mother, I know one thing. It is the dearest, most handsome, and most beautiful of all. The hawk, the kite, and the pigeons, terrified by the looming presence of a kite, called upon the hawk for protection. He immediately agreed to help them. Once admitted into the pigeon's cote, the hawk wreaked havoc, killing far more pigeons in a single day than the kite could catch in an entire year. This served as a stark reminder to avoid remedies that may turn out to be worse than the original problem. Meanwhile, in a fierce war between the dolphins and the whales, a sprat emerged from the waves, offering to mediate their conflict if they would accept him as an umpire. One of the dolphins retorted, "We'd rather face our own destruction than allow your interference in our affairs." In another tale, a swallow returning from her travels was drawn to living among humans, built her nest in the wall of a court of justice, where she raised 7 young birds. Unfortunately, a serpent slinked past the nest from its hole in the wall and devoured the helpless fledglings. The swallow, discovering her nest was empty, mourned deeply and cried out, "Woe is me, a stranger. In this place where the rights of all are upheld, alone must suffer wrong." River flowed, carrying 2 pots downstream, one made of earthenware and the other of brass. The earthen pot called out to the brass pot, "Please keep your distance and do not come near me, for if you touch me even slightly, we'll shatter into pieces. Besides, I have no desire to be close to you." Indeed, it is often said that equals make the best friends. The Shepherd and the Wolf. Once a shepherd stumbled upon a wolf's whelp and decided to raise it. Over time, he taught the young wolf to steal lambs from nearby flocks. The wolf, proving to be a quick learner, warned the shepherd, "Since you have taught me to steal, you had better keep a keen eye on your own flock, or you might lose some of them." Warned the shepherd, "Since you have taught me to steal, you had better keep a keen eye on your own flock, or you might lose some of them." And the man visited his other daughter. One day, the son woke up the next day, who was married to the tile maker. "And how are you?" he asked her. "Things are going well," she replied. "My husband is always busy, and we're managing nicely." The man, pleased with both daughters, then asked whether they would like anything. The daughter married to the gardener said, "Simply wish for good crops this season." The one married to the tile maker said, "Hope for plenty of good tiles." The Elephant and the Tailor. One day, a tailor was sewing outside his shop when an elephant happened to pass by. The elephant, curious about the tailor's work, leaned down to take a closer look. The tailor, irritated by the disturbance, shouted, "Get away from my work." The elephant, feeling insulted, trumpeted loudly and stomped away. Later, the tailor realized that he had offended one of the most powerful creatures. Filled with regret, then he went in search of the elephant to apologize. The elephant, hearing the tailor's words of remorse, decided to forgive him. After all, sometimes misunderstandings can bridge the gap between the smallest and the largest of creatures. She said, "Everything is going well for me. If your sister wishes for rain and you wish for dry weather, which of the two should align my wishes with?" The Thief and His Mother. A boy stole a lesson book from one of his classmates and took it home to his mother. She not only refrained from punishing him, but encouraged him instead. The next time, he stole a cloak and brought it to her. And once again, she praised him. As the youth grew into adulthood, he began stealing items of even greater value. At last, he was caught in the very act. With his hands bound behind him, he was led away to the place of public execution. His mother followed the crowd, beating her breast in sorrow. The young man then said, "Wish to say something to my mother in her ear." She leaned in close, and in a swift motion, he seized her ear with his teeth and bit it off. The mother scolded him as an unnatural child, to which he replied, "Ah, if you had punished me when first stole and brought you that lesson book, I would not have ended up like this, nor would be facing this disgraceful death." The Old Man and Death. An old man was working in the forest, chopping wood. One day, while carrying his bundles to the city to sell, he grew tired from the long journey. He sat down by the roadside, dropped his load, and called out for Death to come to him. Death immediately appeared in response to his summons and asked why he had called for him. The old man hurriedly replied, So that, dot, 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 D and T stanza, and dot, dot, and so that, dot, right death, dot, and so that, dot D and T stanza, and dot, dot, and so that, dot, 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 and dot, 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 and dot, 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 and so that, lifting the load, you may place it once again upon my shoulders. The fir tree and the bramble. Fir tree boastfully declared to the bramble, You are good for nothing at all. I am used everywhere, for roofs and houses. The bramble responded, If only you could remember the axes and saws that are ready to chop you down. You would wish you had grown as a bramble. Not a fir tree. Better poverty without care than riches filled with it. Aesop. The purchaser of a black servant believed that the color of his skin was merely dirt accumulated through the neglect of his former masters. Upon bringing him home, he tried every method to clean him. Subjecting the man to endless scrubbing. The servant caught a severe cold. Yet his skin never changed in color or complexion. What's bred in the bone will stick to the flesh. The mouse, the frog, and the hawk. Once upon a time, there was a mouse who always lived on land. By sheer misfortune, he formed a close friendship with a frog, who spent most of his time in the water. One day, feeling mischievous, the frog tied one of his own feet tightly to the mouse. Together, they ventured to the meadow where they usually gathered food. However, as they enjoyed their time, the frog gradually led the mouse closer and closer to the pool where he lived. When they reached the water's edge, the frog suddenly jumped in, dragging the mouse along with him. Thrilled by the water, croaking gleefully, as if he had done a great service to his friend. Unfortunately, the poor mouse couldn't swim and soon found himself suffocated, his lifeless body floating on the surface, still attached to the frog. Hawk saw this scene from above and swooped down, snatching the mouse with its talons and carrying it high into the sky. Since the frog was still tethered to the mouse, he was also captured and became prey, ultimately meeting his end as he was devoured by the hawk. The lesson is clear. Those who cause harm may find themselves suffering the consequences as well. The fisherman and his nets. Fisherman, diligently working at his trade, made a remarkable cast and reeled in a tremendous catch of fish. With skillful handling of his net, he managed to keep all the larger fish securely and pulled them onto the shore. However, the smaller fish couldn't be contained and slipped back through the net's meshes into the sea. The wolf and the sheep-wolf, badly wounded and bitten by dogs, lay sick and injured in his den. Desperate need of food, made temporal action and called out to a sheep passing by and asked it to fetch some water from a nearby stream. "If you bring me a drink," he said, "this fact, I'll find a way to provide myself with meat." "Of course," replied the sheep. "If you bring me a drink, you would surely expect me to provide meat as well." Hypocritical words are easily seen for what they are. The old woman and the wine jar. An old woman stumbled across an empty jar that had once been filled with exquisite vintage wine. Although the jar was now empty, it still held the delightful fragrance of its former contents. The huntsman, seeing the fisherman's catch, couldn't help but admire the fine array of fish shimmering in the sunlight. "What a bountiful haul you have there," he exclaimed, a hint of envy in his voice. The fisherman smiled and replied, Indeed, it's been a good day, but tell me, my friend, what have you caught today?" The huntsman shrugged, saying, only the thrill of the chase. My dogs and I have been pursuing game all day without success. They chatted for a while, sharing tales of their adventures, when the huntsman suddenly had an idea. "Why don't you join me for a game tomorrow? Could use a partner, and maybe, together, we can turn our fortunes around." The fisherman thought for a moment before answering. "Appreciate the offer, but our pursuits are very different. Aim my sustenance from the water, while you hunt on land. Fear would only be in your way." "Not at all," said the huntsman, entertained by the thought. "Come, let's make a wager. If you catch more fish tomorrow than do game, I'll trade you half of my catch when return." The fisherman chuckled, shaking his head. "You underestimate the differences in our skills. But if you insist, accept your challenge. Just remember, my friend, the waters are my domain." The two parted ways, each confident in their own expertise. The next day, they set out on their respective hunts, each determined to come out victorious. In the end, the fisherman returned with a full basket of fish, while the huntsman had little to show for his efforts. As they met again, the fisherman laughed heartily. "It appears nature has favored my craft today." The huntsman frowned in indignant feeling, realized the wisdom in the fisherman's words. "You have proven your proficiency, to prove now that our talents are not directly comparable. Each of us must own our own skills." From this encounter, they learned the value of recognizing one another's strengths and the importance of respect in their individual trades. And thus, they parted as friends, each vowing to appreciate the work of the other. The huntsman longed for the fish, while the fisherman equally desired the game in the huntsman's bag. They quickly agreed to exchange the fruits of their day's efforts. Both were so pleased with their deal that they continued this arrangement, trading their catches day after day. Eventually, a neighbor warned them, "If you keep this up, you'll soon undermine the joy of your exchanges, and both of you will be left wanting to keep the results of your own endeavors." He advised them to abstain from regular trading in order to truly appreciate what they had. Meanwhile, there was a crow who had stolen a piece of meat and was perched high in a tree, holding it proudly in her beak. Clever Fox, spotting the crow, coveted the delicious meat. Using his cunning, he devised a plan. "How beautiful the crow is!" he exclaimed, admiring her elegance and the lovely sheen of her feathers. "Oh, if only her voice matched her beauty. She would undoubtedly be seen as the queen of birds," he said deceitfully. The crow, eager to dismiss the implication about her voice, let out a loud caw, causing her to drop the meat. The sly fox quickly seized it and then turned to the crow, saying, "My dear crow, your voice is certainly adequate, but your wits could use some sharpening." In another tale, there was a poor widow who owned a single sheep. When it came time to shear the wool, wanting to save money, she decided to do it herself. However, her lack of skill resulted in her not only shearing the fleece, but also injuring the flesh beneath. The sheep, writhing in pain, exclaimed, "Why do you hurt me, mistress? What good does my blood do for the wool? If you desire my meat, there's the butcher, ready to end my life at once. But if it's fleece you want, then a shearer would be the one to help without causing me harm." This illustrates that the least expense is not always the greatest profit. The stag replied, "I'm aware that this is the dwelling of my foe, yet my fright has driven me to seek refuge wherever could find it. Believed would be safe among you." The ox shook his head and said, "You may find temporary shelter here, but ultimately, you cannot avoid the consequences of your choices. You are in a place that could very well lead to your downfall." This story teaches us that seeking refuge in the wrong place, especially when life is at stake, can result in dire consequences. It's crucial to choose our hiding spots wisely and to be aware of the true nature of our surroundings. Just allow me, dear friend, to remain where I am, and will do my best to find a favorable opportunity to escape. As evening approached, the herdsman arrived to feed his cattle but did not notice the stag. Even the farm bailiff, along with several laborers, passed through the shed without spotting him. The stag, feeling relieved, began to express his heartfelt gratitude to the oxen who had so generously assisted him in his time of need. One of the oxen replied, "We truly wish you well, but the danger is not yet over. There is one more individual who will pass through the shed, one who possesses what seems like 100 eyes. Until he comes and goes, your life remains in peril." Just then, their master entered, visibly upset that his oxen had not been properly fed. He approached their racks and exclaimed, "Why is there such a shortage of fodder? There's not even half enough straw for them to lie on. Those lazy fellows haven't even bothered to sweep away the cobwebs." As he inspected everything in turn, he caught sight of the tips of the stag's antlers peeking out from the straw. Summoning his laborers, he ordered them to seize and kill the stag. The two dogs. Man had two dogs, a hound, trained to assist him in his hunts, and a house dog, taught to guard the home. After returning home from a successful day's sport, he always shared a generous portion of his catch with the house dog, The hound, feeling quite resentful, confronted his companion, saying, "It's unfair for you to enjoy the fruits of my hard work while you provide no help in the chase." The house dog replied, "Don't blame me, my friend. Instead, take it up with our master, who chose not to teach me how to labor, but instead to rely on the efforts of others. Children should not be held responsible for the shortcomings of their parents." The Wild Ass and the Lion. Once upon a time, a wild ass and a lion formed an alliance, aiming to capture the forest creatures more easily. The lion promised to lend his strength to the wild ass, while the wild ass offered his speed in return. After they had caught enough prey to satisfy their needs, the lion took it upon himself to distribute the spoils. He divided the catch into 3 portions and declared, "I will take the first share, as I am the king. We'll take the second share, as your partner in this hunt. And as for the third share, mark my words, it will bring you great misfortune unless you willingly give it up to me and flee as swiftly as you can." The moral is clear: might makes right. The lion and the dolphin. Lion, wandering by the shore, spotted a dolphin emerging from the waves. A lion proposed that they form an alliance, claiming that they should be the best of friends since he was the king of beasts on land, while the dolphin ruled over all the creatures of the ocean. The dolphin eagerly agreed to this proposition. Not long after, the lion faced off against a wild bull and called upon the dolphin for assistance. While the dolphin was more than willing to help, he found himself unable to reach the land. In a fit of rage, the lion accused him of being a traitor. The dolphin countered, saying, "Do not blame me, my friend, but rather nature, which has bestowed upon me the dominion of the sea, yet deprived me of the ability to live on land. The eagle and the arrow." An eagle perched upon a high rock, observing the movements of a hare that he intended to capture as his prey. The eagle and the arrow. An eagle perched on a high rock, watching the movements of a hare, which he intended to capture as his prey. An archer, hidden from sight, took careful aim and shot, wounding the eagle mortally. With a final glance at the arrow lodged in his heart, the eagle realized that the arrow was feathered with plumes from his own wings. "It is a double grief to me," he lamented, "to perish by an arrow made from my own feathers." The sick kite, gravely ill, said to his mother, "Mother, do not weep for me, but rather invoke the gods that my life may be spared." She replied, "Alas, my son, the seen from the gods of this world, which of the gods do you think will take pity on you?" Is there one whom you have not insulted by stealing from their very altars a part of the offerings made to them? We must cultivate friendships in times of prosperity if we hope to receive help in times of adversity. The lion and the boar, on a scorching summer day, when the heat drove the animals to seek water, a lion and a boar arrived at a small well at the same moment, eager to quench their thirst. They argued fiercely over who would drink first, and soon found themselves locked in a fierce battle. As they paused to catch their breath, readying for another round, they noticed a group of vultures lurking nearby, waiting for the opportunity to feast on the one who would fall first. Realizing their shared danger, they quickly made peace, agreeing, "It's wiser to be friends than to end up as a meal for crows or vultures." The mice in council. The mice called a council to figure out how they could best alert themselves to the approach of their arch-nemesis, the cat. After numerous suggestions, the most favored idea was to attach a bell to the cat's neck. This way, the sound of the ringing would alert the mice, giving them a chance to scurry away and hide in their holes before the cat could pounce. However, as the discussion continued about who among them would take on the task of putting the bell on the cat, they realized there was no one willing to step up. The one-eyed doe, so many dots and places planed as so close to the edge of the cliff she could, hoping to ensure her safety. She turned her sound eye toward the land, so she could catch the first signs of any approaching hunter or hound, while her injured eye faced the sea, a direction from which she expected no danger. One day, passing boatmen spotted her and took aim, mortally wounding her. As she drew her last breath, she lamented, "Oh, what a wretched creature am! To take such precautions against the land, only to find this seashore, where sought safety, much more perilous." The mice and the weasels and the mice were locked in a constant battle, marked by much bloodshed. The weasels were always the victors. The mice believed their frequent defeats stemmed from the absence of designated leaders to guide them, leaving them vulnerable in the chaos of battle. In response, they chose leaders renowned for their noble heritage, strength, and wisdom, those celebrated for their bravery in combat. Their goal was to organize their forces into troops, regiments, and battalions, hoping to improve their discipline. Once their army was prepared, and the Herald Mouse officially declared war by challenging the weasels, the newly appointed generals adorned their heads with straws, making them stand out prominently to their troops. However, as the battle commenced, a great panic swept through the mice, sending them scurrying to their burrows at once. The generals were unable to escape and were captured and devoured by the weasels. Thus, the more honor they sought, the greater the peril they faced. The shepherd and the sea shepherd was watching over his sheep near the shore when he noticed the sea was calm and smooth. He felt a strong desire to set out on a voyage for trade. So, he sold his entire flock, soul and sheep, invested the money in a cargo of dates, and set sail. However, a fierce tempest soon arose, putting his ship in danger of sinking. In a desperate attempt to save himself, he threw all his merchandise overboard and barely managed to escape with his life in the now empty ship. Not long after, when someone passed by and noticed the serene surface of the sea, they remarked, "It longs for dates again, which is why it looks so tranquil." The ass, the cock, and the lion, an ass and a cock, were together in a straw yard when a hungry lion approached, desperate for a meal. Just as the lion was about to pounce on the ass, the cock, known for his loud crow, let out a call. The lion, who supposedly has a peculiar aversion to the sound, turned and fled as quickly as he could. The ass, not often did the bite of the cock's crow, mustered the courage to pursue him, believing he could now attack. He didn't run very far before the lion turned around, caught him, and tore him to shreds. This shows that false confidence can often lead one into danger. The rivers and the sea. The rivers came together to voice their grievances to the sea, asking, why is it that when we flow into your waters, which are so drinkable and sweet, you transform us, making us salty and undrinkable? The sea, realizing their intention to blame him, replied, if you wish to stop this, then cease to flow into me, and you will no longer become briny. The wild boar and the fox. Wild boar stood beneath a tree, sharpening his tusks against the trunk. Fox, passing by, asked him why he was honing his teeth when there was no threat from hunters or hounds. He replied, do this with purpose. It would never do to sharpen my weapons just when should be using them. Being well prepared for battle is the best guarantee of peace. The milkwoman and her pail. Farmer's daughter was carrying her pail of milk from the field to the farmhouse when she fell into deep thought. The money you'll get from selling this milk will buy at least 300 eggs. Those eggs, despite any mishaps, will yield 250 chickens. The chickens will be ready for the market just when poultry prices are highest. So by the end of the year, by alligator, I'll have enough money from my share to buy a new gown. In this dress, I'll attend the Christmas parties, where all the eligible young men will propose to me. But I'll toss my head and refuse them all. At that moment, she tossed her head in sync with her daydreams, and down fell the milk pail to the ground, causing all her imaginary plans to vanish in an instant. Your master must be a wise man indeed to keep you so well fed. But tell me, is it worth it to live in such bondage? The mastiff replied, I am well cared for, and though wear this collar, have security and comfort like no other. The wolf, intrigued, said, but what of your freedom? Look at me, roam the forests and mountains without a care in the world. The mastiff responded, true, but have a warm place to sleep and a full belly, while you must hunt and face danger every day. There is something to be said for safety. The wolf grew quiet for a moment, then retorted, but what is the value of comfort if it comes at the cost of your liberty? Would rather face hunger than live a life of chains. With that, the wolf turned and trotted away, leaving the mastiff to ponder his words. And so it is that some choose the security of servitude, while others embrace the wild freedom that comes with risk. May no friend of mine ever find himself in such a situation, for the weight of this chain is enough to ruin the appetite. The three tradesmen' great city was under siege, and its inhabitants gathered to discuss the best ways to protect themselves from the enemy. Bricklayer fervently suggested that bricks would provide the most effective means of defense. Carpenter, equally passionate, proposed timber as a better option. At this point, a courier stood up and declared, Gentlemen, I disagree with you entirely. There is no material for defense that can match a covering of hides, and nothing is as good as leather. Every man for himself. The ass carrying the image. An ass once carried a renowned wooden image through the streets of a city, destined for one of its temples. As he walked by, the crowd bowed low in reverence before the image. The ass, believing that the crowd was bowing in respect for him, puffed up with pride and refused to take another step. The driver, noticing the stubborn behavior, lashed the ass with his whip and exclaimed, "Oh, you foolish creature! It has not come to the point where men offer worship to an ass. Those who take credit for the achievements of others are not wise." The master and his dogs. One day, a man found himself stranded in his country house by a fierce storm. To feed his household, he first slaughtered his sheep, then his goats. As the storm raged on, he was forced to do the unthinkable and butcher his yoke oxen for sustenance. Witnessing this, the dogs gathered and discussed their fate. They said to one another, "It's time for us to leave. For if the master is willing to sacrifice his oxen, who work for his benefit, how can we expect him to show mercy toward us? Friend who mistreats his own kin is not to be trusted." The old hound, who in the prime of his youth and strength had never backed down from any beast in the forest, found himself, in his old age, facing a wild boar during a chase. He bravely seized the creature by the ear, but due to the decay of his teeth, he couldn't maintain his grip, and the boar managed to escape. When his master arrived shortly after, he was greatly disappointed and furiously reprimanded the hound. The hound gazed up and replied, "It isn't my fault, master. My spirit is as strong as ever, but cannot overcome my frailties. Deserve to be commended for who was, rather than blamed for what have become." Two travelers and the axe. Two men were traveling together. Two travelers and the axe. Two men were traveling together when one of them stumbled upon an axe lying on the path. "Have found an axe," he announced. "No, my friend," the other replied. "You should say, 'We have found an axe.'" They hadn't gone far when they caught sight of the axe's owner, who was pursuing them. The man who had picked up the axe exclaimed, "We are done for." "Nay, ... The other responded, ... "Stick with your original words, my friend. What you said then, think of it now. Say, ... not 'we are done for.' He who shares the danger should also share the reward. The old lion, an old lion, ... weary from the years and weakened by illness, lay on the ground, nearing death. Boar charged, and him and sought vengeance for a long-held grudge. Striking him with his tusks, ... Shortly after, almost, a bull came along and gored him with its horns as if he were an adversary. When the donkey observed that this mighty creature could be attacked without retribution, he took the opportunity to kick the lion on the forehead with his hind legs. The waning lion sighed. "I have reluctantly endured the insults of the brave, but to be forced to suffer such indignities from you, a disgrace to nature, is truly to face a double death." The wolf and the shepherds. As a wolf passed by, he spotted some shepherds in a hut enjoying a haunch of mutton for their dinner. He approached them and remarked, "What a commotion you would make if we're to do what you're doing." The seaside travelers, group of travelers, journeying along the shoreline, plain, enjoying food from their dinner, climbed out of the hut of a tall cliff. They spotted what they believed to be a large ship in the distance. They waited eagerly, complaining all about it at the wind, enjoying the harbor. However, as the object was carried closer to shore by the wind, they soon realized that it was merely a small boat and not a ship at all. When it finally reached the beach, they discovered that it was nothing more than a large bundle of sticks. One of them turned to his companions and said, "We've waited in vain, for all we see now is just a load of wood." Indeed, our expectations often exceed the realities of life. The ass and his shadow. Traveler hired an ass to carry him to a distant destination. With the day growing intensely hot and the sun blazing overhead, the traveler stopped to rest and sought refuge from the heat in the shadow of the ass. However, since the shade provided cover for only one person, a heated dispute erupted between the traveler and the ass's owner over who had the right to the shadow. The owner argued that he had only rented out the ass, not its shadow, while the traveler insisted that by hiring the ass, he had also hired its shadow. The argument escalated from words to blows, and in the midst of their fight, the ass galloped away. In quarreling about the shadow, we often lose the substance. Once upon a time, there was an ass belonging to an herb seller who gave him too little food and too much work. Feeling desperate, the ass made a petition to Jupiter, asking to be freed from his current service and to be assigned to another master. Jupiter, however, warned him that he might regret his request. Nevertheless, he caused the ass to be sold to a tile-maker. Soon after, the ass discovered that he had exchanged one hardship for another, as he now faced even heavier loads and harder labor in the brickfield. Unsatisfied, he pleaded once more for a change of master. Jupiter, informing him that this would be the last time he could grant such a request, arranged for him to be sold to a tanner. As the ass found himself in the hands of a man whose work was even more difficult, he groaned and lamented about his unfortunate situation. "It would have been better for me to have been starved by one master or overworked by the other than to have been sold to my current owner. Woe, even after am dead, tan my hide and make use of me." Mercury and the sculptor. Once, Mercury decided to discover how he was regarded by mortals. To achieve this, he disguised himself as a man and visited a sculptor's studio. After observing various statues, he inquired about the price of two figures, one of Jupiter and the other of Juno. He slipped out of the hut and made his escape into the safety of the woods. The woodcutter, however, was not entirely free from worry. He thought to himself, "What if the huntsman discovers my deception? Could end up in trouble for helping the fox." But as the day wore on, he convinced himself that he did the right thing by saving the cunning creature. Meanwhile, the fox, feeling relieved and safe, pondered the woodcutter's actions. He knew he had been foolish to trust someone so close to danger, yet he marveled at how cunning he had been to escape once again. No matter how risky the situation, cleverness always prevails, he mused as he vanished deeper into the forest. From then on, the woodcutter learned to be more cautious about whom he helped, while the fox continued his trickery, always looking for the next chance to outsmart those who hunted him. In the end, both creatures lived on, each using their wits to navigate a world filled with challenges and threats. He called out to him, reproaching, "You ungrateful creature, you owe your life to me, yet you leave without so much as a thank you." The fox responded, "Indeed, I would have expressed my gratitude wholeheartedly if your actions matched your words, and if your hands hadn't betrayed your speech." The oak in the reed's colossal oak was uprooted by the wind, crashing down across a stream. It found itself among some reeds and addressed them, "Wonder how you, so light and fragile, manage not to be completely crushed by these fierce winds." The reeds replied, "You fight and battle against the wind, and as a result, you are destroyed. We, on the other hand, bend with the slightest breath of air, allowing us to remain unbroken and safe. Stoop to conquer." The lion in a farmyard. Lion wandered into a farmyard. The farmer, wanting to catch him, quickly shut the gate. Realizing he was trapped, the lion turned his fury on the sheep, slaughtering them, and then went after the oxen. The farmer, growing increasingly concerned for his own safety, opened the gate and let the lion escape. As the lion departed, the farmer lamented deeply over the destruction of his sheep and oxen. However, his wife, who had witnessed the entire event, remarked, "Honestly, you deserve this. How could you possibly think it was wise to confine a lion within your farmyard when you tremble in fear at just the sound of its roar from a distance?" The wolf and the lion, wolf, having stolen a lamb from a fold, was making his way to his lair when he encountered a lion on the path. The lion seized the lamb from the wolf, who, now at a safe distance, exclaimed, "You've unjustly taken what rightfully belonged to me." The lion, with a mocking tone, replied, "Unjustly, was it? Gift from a friend. Perhaps the bird catcher, the partridge, the cockbird and the cock. Birdcatcher was about to sit down to a dinner of herbs when a friend unexpectedly arrived. The birdcatcher found his trap completely empty, having caught nothing, and reluctantly decided to sacrifice a pied partridge he had previously tamed as a decoy. The partridge begged for its life, pleading, "What will you do without me the next time you set your nets? Who will chirp you to sleep at night and call in the responding birds?" Compassionate, the birdcatcher spared the partridge, opting instead to select a fine young cock, one just beginning to grow its comb, from its perch. Cock lamented in distress, "If you take my life, who will herald the dawn for you? Who will rouse you for your daily tasks, or remind you when it's time to visit the bird trap in the morning?" The birdcatcher acknowledged, "You make a valid point. You are excellent at telling the time of day. But my friend and must have our dinners." In matters of necessity, there are no laws. The ant and the dove. An ant made its way to the river bank to quench its thirst, but it was swept away by the rushing water and found itself on the brink of drowning. Look at those frogs. They're fleeing for their lives, and yet we're the ones who are supposed to be scared. The other hares paused, their frantic energy giving way to confusion. One of them replied, "Frank, perhaps we are not as alone in our fears as we thought." The hares stood at the edge of the precipice, reconsidering their gloomy plan. Instead of jumping into the depths, they realized that their fear was shared. They realized that there might be strength in numbers, even if it was in the form of the frightened frogs. Solemn silence fell over them as the hares exchanged looks of understanding. They began to rethink their situation, realizing that life was not simply about giving in to despair, but finding a way to cope with fear together, rather than escaping it. In the end, they turned away from the edge, opting instead to confront their fears as a united group, rejecting the notion that their lives were not worth the struggle. Together, they chose to face the unknown challenges ahead, emboldened by the solidarity they found in one another. Stay, my friends, do not act on your initial impulse, for you can see that there are creatures who are even more timid than we are. The monkey and the fisherman. Monkey perched high in a tree watched as some fishermen cast their nets into a river, intently observing their every move. After some time, intently, the fishermen, having caught nothing, decided to pack up and headed home for dinner, leaving their nets on the riverbank. The monkey, known for its imitative nature, climbed down from the tree and attempted to replicate what he had seen. He grabbed the net, threw it into the river, but soon found himself tangled in its meshes and ultimately drowned. In his final moments, he thought to himself, "Deserve this. What business did have trying to catch fish when had never handled a net before?" The swan and the goose. Certain wealthy man purchased a goose and a swan at the market. He fed one for his dinner table and kept the other for the beauty of its song. The fisherman, "Please spare me. May be small, but promise to grow larger. If you let me go now, I will become a much bigger catch in the future." The fisherman, amused by the little fish's plea, responded, "Why would you take the risk of letting you go for the mere chance of what you might become? You are no use to me as you are. I'd rather keep you now while have the opportunity." And so, the fisherman returned home with his catch, deciding that sometimes it's better to appreciate what you have rather than gamble on uncertain future gains. The fox and the grapes. One day, a hungry fox stumbled upon a vineyard. As he wandered through the rows of luscious grapes hanging from the vine, his mouth watered at the sight. He leapt and leapt, but the grapes always seemed just out of reach. After several attempts, he finally gave up and sat down in defeat. As he walked away, he muttered to himself, "Those grapes are probably sour anyway. Who wants them?" And this is how we often dismiss what we can't have, labeling it as undesirable. The tortoise and the hare. In a race between the swift hare and the slow tortoise, all the animals gathered to watch. Confident in his speed, the hare sped ahead, leaving the tortoise far behind. Convinced of his victory, the hare decided to take a nap mid-race. Meanwhile, the tortoise continued on, slowly but surely. When the hare finally woke up, he panicked, rushing to the finish line, only to find the tortoise had already crossed it. Thus, the moral is clear. Slow and steady wins the race. Oh, sir, what good can be to you? And how little I'm worth. Have not yet reached my full size. Please spare my life and return me to the sea. Will soon grow into a large fish, fit for the tables of the wealthy. And then you can catch me again and make a handsome profit. The fisherman replied, "It would be quite foolish to forfeit my certain gain for the chance of a greater, uncertain profit. Now, let me tell you about the hunter and the woodman. Hunter, not particularly brave, was searching for the tracks of a lion. He asked a man who was chopping down oaks in the forest if he had seen any signs of the lion's footsteps or knew where its den was. "Itagwia," said the man, "immediately show you the lion himself." The hunter, turning pale and chattering his teeth with fear, quickly replied, "No, thank you, didn't ask for that. I am just looking for its tracks, not the lion itself." Indeed, indeed. A true hero is brave in actions as well as in words. The swollen fox, very hungry fox, spotting some bread and meat left behind by shepherds in the hollow of an oak, crept inside to indulge in a hearty meal. However, once he finished, he was so full that he couldn't manage to get back out. In his distress, he began to groan and lament his unfortunate fate. Another fox, passing by, indeed, heard his cries and approached to ask what was wrong. Upon learning of his predicament, the second fox said, "Ah, my friend, you will have to remain there until you lose enough weight to fit through the hole again. Only then will you be able to escape." The two frogs lived in the same pool. When the pool dried up in the scorching summer heat, they decided to leave and set out together in search of a new home. As they traveled, they came across a deep well, filled to the brim with water. One of the frogs eagerly suggested, "Let's jump in and make our home here. It will provide us with shelter and food." The other frog, being more cautious, replied, "But what if the water runs dry? We could find ourselves trapped. How can we ever get out from such great depths? It's important to think about the consequences of our actions." The lamp, drenched in too much oil and shining brightly, all boasted of providing more light than the sun. But then a sudden gust of wind blew, and the lamp was instantly extinguished. Its owner reignited it and said, "Do not boast any longer. From now on, be content to shine in silence. Remember, even the stars do not need to be relit." The camel and the Arab, an Arab camel driver, all, after finishing the loading of his camel, asked, "Which would you prefer, going uphill or downhill?" The poor creature responded, "All." With a hint of logic, "Why do you ask me? Is the level path through the desert no longer an option?" The miller, his son, and their ass. Miller and his son were taking their ass to a nearby fair to sell him. They had not traveled far when they encountered a group of women gathered around a well, all chatting and laughing. "Look there," exclaimed one of the women. "Have you ever seen such fellows? Trudging along the road on foot when they could be riding." Hearing this, the old man quickly had his son climb onto the donkey, and he continued to walk cheerfully by its side. Presently, they came across the group of elderly men engaged in earnest debate. One of them said, "It's just as was saying." What respect is shown to old age these days? See that lazy lad riding while his old father has to walk? Get down, and then, you young scoundrel, and let the old man rest his weary limbs. With that, The old man had his son dismount and climbed onto the donkey himself. They hadn't gone far when they encountered a group of women and children. "Well, you lazy old fellow," and several voices chimed in unison. "How can you ride on the donkey while that poor little lad can hardly keep pace by your side?" The good-natured miller immediately lifted his son up behind him. They were now almost at the town. "Pray tell, honest friend," D-Lake said a citizen, "is that donkey your own?" "Yes," replied the old man. "Oh, one wouldn't have thought so," said the other, "by the way you load him. Why, pacey, even in the donkey's lap. You two fellows are better able to carry the poor beast than he to carry you." "Anything to please you," said the old man. "We can only give it a try." With that, he and his son dismounted, tied the donkey's legs together, and with the help of a pole, attempted to carry him on their shoulders over a bridge near the entrance to the town. This amusing sight drew a crowd of onlookers who gathered to laugh at their antics. But the donkey, disturbed by the noise and the unusual treatment, broke free from the ropes binding him, tumbled off the pole, and fell into the river. With that, the old man, feeling both vexed and ashamed, made his way back home, now convinced that in his effort to please everyone, he had pleased no one and lost his donkey in the process. The cat and the mice. In a certain house, there was a serious problem. It was overrun with mice. Cat, discovering the chaos, made her way into the house and started catching and devouring the mice one by one. Fearful for their lives, the mice huddled tightly in their holes. The cat, realizing she could no longer reach them, decided she needed to lure them out with a clever trick. So, she jumped onto a peg and, hanging there, pretended to be dead. One brave mouse, peeking out cautiously, saw her and said, "And brave mouse, ah, my good madam, even if you turned into a meal bag, we still wouldn't come near you. Now, let me tell you about the mouse and the bull." Bull had been bitten by a tiny mouse, and enraged by the wound, he attempted to catch the little one. But the mouse scurried safely into his hole. The bull, frustrated, began to dig at the walls with his horns, but soon grew tired before he could flush the mouse out. Exasperated, he slumped down to sleep outside the hole. The mouse, seeing his chance, peeked out, stealthily crept up the bull's flank, and bit him once more before retreating back into the safety of his hole. The bull, now bewildered and unsure of what to do, was left feeling quite perplexed. At this, the mouse remarked, "The mighty do not always triumph. There are moments when the small and humble prove to be the most cunning." The dog and the cook, wealthy man, hosted a grand feast, inviting numerous friends and acquaintances. His dog took this opportunity to invite a friend of his own, a stranger dog, saying, "My master is throwing a feast, therefore, and there's sure to be plenty of food left over. Come and dine with me tonight." The invited dog arrived at the appointed hour, and, upon seeing the lavish preparations for such a splendid occasion, exclaimed with joy, "How fortunate am to be here. Rarely get an opportunity like this. I'll make sure to eat enough to fill me for both today and tomorrow." While he reveled in his good fortune and wagged his tail to share his excitement with his friend, the cook noticed him bustling around among the dishes. Without hesitation, he grabbed the dog by his fore and hind legs and unceremoniously tossed him out of the window. They were quite the spectacle, charming everyone who laid eyes on them. The prince delighted in showcasing their talents at grand gatherings, where laughter and applause followed their every move. However, as time went on, the monkeys began to yearn for their freedom, longing to swing through trees and play in the open air rather than performing for a crowd. One day, during a lavish celebration, the monkeys seized their chance. In the midst of their routine, they broke free from their leashes and dashed toward the garden, leaving the astonished audience gasping in surprise. The prince, furious at their audacity, ordered his servants to capture them at once. Yet, the monkeys sprinted and jumped with such agility that no amount of effort could bring them back. As they disappeared into the foliage, the starlight shone down on them. And for the first time in a long while, they felt truly free. The moral of this tale? Those who are forced into servitude may long for freedom more than the treasures they gain by pleasing their masters. Being naturally adept mimics of human actions, the monkeys proved to be quick learners. When dressed in their fine garments and masks, they danced as gracefully as any of the courtiers. This spectacle was often repeated to much applause, until one day, the mischievous courtier decided to cause some trouble. He pulled a handful of nuts from his pocket and tossed them onto the stage. At the sight of the nuts, the monkeys forgot their choreography and reverted to their true nature, tearing off their masks and ripping apart their costumes in a frenzy to fight over the treats. The dance performance abruptly ended, met with the laughter and ridicule of the audience. Now, let's turn to the story of the farmer and the fox. Farmer, harboring a grudge against a fox for raiding his poultry yard, finally caught the cunning creature. Determined to exact a fitting revenge, he tied a rope, thoroughly soaked in oil, to the fox's tail and set it ablaze. In a twist of fate, the fox darted straight into the farmer's fields, where he had originally been captured. "It serves you right for being so greedy," the kite said, circling above. "If you had been wise enough to take just what you could handle, you wouldn't be in this predicament." With that, the kite swooped down to feast on the unfortunate seagull, whose excessive appetite had sealed its fate. The moral of the story teaches us that moderation is key. Often our own excesses and lack of self-control lead us to ruin. Now, let us consider the tale of the lion and the mouse. One day, a lion, exhausted from his hunt, lay sleeping in the forest. Little Mouse accidentally ran across his nose, waking him up. Infuriated, the lion caught the mouse and was about to eat him when the tiny creature pleaded for mercy. "Please, let me go. Maybe small, but one day could help you." The lion, amused by the idea, decided to spare the mouse's life and released him. Not long after, the lion found himself trapped in a hunter's net. His roars echoed in the forest, and the mouse, hearing the cries, rushed to the scene. Determined to repay the lion's kindness, the mouse gnawed through the ropes until the lion was free. The moral here is simple. Even the smallest creature can be of great help. You have brought this upon yourself. A bird of the air has no business seeking its food from the sea. Every person should be content to focus on their own affairs. Once upon a time, a lion and a bear both caught sight of a kid at the same moment. And they fought fiercely for possession. As they tore into each other in a desperate struggle. Both were left exhausted and battered from the long and drawn-out conflict. Finally, they lay down, panting and drained. Meanwhile, a fox had been observing from a distance, circling the combatants, seeing the two of them sprawled on the ground with the kid lying untouched between them, he darted in, snatched up the kid, and bolted away as fast as his legs could carry him. The lion and the bear, both too weak to pursue, watched the fox's escape and lamented, "How unfortunate it is that we fought so hard, only to end up serving the interests of a fox." Sometimes it happens that one person bears all the effort, while another reaps all the rewards. The philosopher, the ants, and Mercury philosopher stood on the shore, witnessing the tragic shipwreck of a vessel, with the crew and passengers drowning in the depths of the sea. He lamented the perceived injustice of Providence, questioning how it could allow so many innocent lives to be lost for the sake of one possible criminal aboard the ship. As he was lost in these reflections, He found himself surrounded by an army of ants near their nest. One of the ants climbed up and stung him, prompting him to angrily crush them all beneath his foot. At that moment, Mercury appeared, striking the philosopher with his wand and saying, "Are you truly fit to judge the ways of Providence when you have treated these poor ants in the same cruel manner?" The peasant and the eagle peasant stumbled upon an eagle caught in a trap. Enchanted by the beauty of the majestic bird, he decided to set it free. The eagle proved to be grateful to his rescuer. Spotting the peasant sitting beneath an unstable wall, the eagle swooped down and snatched a bundle from the man's head with its talons. When the peasant sprang up in pursuit, the eagle dropped the bundle back down. The man picked it up and returned to the same spot, only to find that the wall he had been resting under had crumbled to the ground. He marveled at the service the eagle had rendered him. The fox and the leopard. The fox and the leopard found themselves in a disagreement about who is more beautiful. The leopard showed off the various spots adorning his skin, one by one. However, the fox interrupted him, saying, "You may have your spots, but how much more beautiful am, who is adorned not in body, but in mind." The lion and the hare. One day, a lion happened upon a hare who was fast asleep. Just as he was about to pounce on her, a young hart trotted by, capturing the lion's attention. He left the unsuspecting hare behind to chase after the hart. Startled by the commotion, the hare awoke and quickly scampered away. But now, in my anger, you reward me with gold. Truly, you are a perplexing god. From that day on, the carpenter learned that sometimes, in seeking fortune, one must realize that it is not always the reverence shown that brings riches, but rather the actions taken. Thus, he continued to gather the gold and used it wisely, forever reminding himself of that fateful moment when he learned that fortune could smile upon him even when he least expected it. But now, that treat you poorly, I find myself laden with riches. The lion, the fox, and the ass entered into an agreement to help one another on their hunts. After securing a large haul, the lion ass returning from the forest, asked the ass to divide the spoils fairly among the three partners. The ass carefully split the bounty into 3 equal portions and humbly invited the others to choose first. Enraged by the ass's insolence, the lion devoured him on the spot. Then, turning to the fox, the lion requested that he take on the task of division. The fox gathered all the treasures they had caught into one large pile and set aside for himself the smallest possible morsel. The lion, impressed, exclaimed, "Who has taught you, my dear friend, the art of division? You've executed it perfectly." The fox replied, "I learned it from watching the fate of the ass. Happy is the man who learns from the misfortunes of others." A bull and the goat. Bull, in a desperate bid to escape from a lion, sought refuge in a cave recently occupied by some shepherds. Upon entering, he was immediately confronted by a he-goat who fiercely attacked him with his horns. The bull calmly responded, "Feel free to butt me as much as you like. Fear you not, but rather the lion. Once that beast vacates the area, so doing deeds, you'll soon learn the difference in strength between a goat and a bull." This incident highlights a cruel tendency to exploit a friend's vulnerability. The bald knight, who wore a wig, set out for a hunt one day. A sudden gust of wind swept away his hat and wig, prompting a roar of laughter from his companions. He halted his horse, and with great humor joined in the laughter, saying, "Isn't it astonishing that hairs that don't belong to me can fly away, having abandoned even the man from whom they originated?" The oaks and Jupiter. The oaks once approached Jupiter with a complaint, stating, "We have no purpose in bearing the burden of life. Of all the trees that exist, we are the most constantly at risk of the axe." Jupiter replied, You have only yourselves to blame for the misfortunes that befall you. If you weren't such fine pillars and posts, proving so useful to carpenters and farmers, the axe would not be so often laid against your roots. The monkeys and their mother. It is said that a monkey gives birth to 2 young ones at a time. The mother shows great affection and care to one, while she neglects and despises the other. Once upon a time, a mother monkey gave birth to 2 young ones at the same time. She showered one of them with affection and care, while the other received nothing but neglect and disdain. Tragically, the cherished young one was smothered by the excessive love of its mother. Once upon a time, a mother monkey gave birth to 2 young ones at the same time, while the neglected one thrived and grew strong despite the indifference it faced. This teaches us that even the best intentions do not always lead to success. Now, let me share the tale of the hare and the hound. One day, a hound sprang after a hare from its lair, but after a long pursuit, the hound eventually gave up the chase. Goatherd, noticing the hound's halt, mocked it, saying, "One day, let me share the tale of the hare and the hound. The little one is the better runner of the 2. The hound replied, "One day, you failed to grasp the difference between us, was running for a dinner, but he was running for his life. And then we have the shepherd and the dog. Shepherd was gathering his sheep into the fold for the night when he was about to close the door, inadvertently trapping a wolf inside with them. The dog, noticing the danger, exclaimed, hence the chase talent, 'Master, my lord, how can you expect the sheep to be safe if you let a wolf into the fold?' Lastly, we find the tale of the oak and the woodcutters. The woodcutter felled a mighty mountain oak, splitting it into pieces and using branches from the tree itself as wedges to divide the trunk. The oak sighed and said, 'I am unconcerned by the blows of the axe aimed at my roots, but it pains me to be torn apart by these wedges made from my own branches. Indeed, the misfortunes that stem from within ourselves are the hardest to endure.' Now, let us turn to the tale of the wasp and the snake. Wasp perched itself upon the head of a snake, mercilessly, striking him with its stings, mercilessly, ultimately wounding him to death. The unfortunate couple soon discovered that they had lost their source of endless wealth. They had been so blinded by greed that they didn't realize that the hen was simply a bird giving them a daily gift. And now they had nothing left. The moral here is that greed often leads to ruin. Let us now turn to the tale of the fox and the grapes. Hungry Fox came across a bunch of grapes hanging high on a vine. After numerous attempts to reach the tempting fruit, he finally gave up, saying, "They are probably sour anyway." This story teaches us that we often belittle what we cannot obtain. Having done so, they were surprised to discover that the hen was just like their other hens. The foolish pair, in their greed for quick wealth, deprived themselves of the steady gain they had enjoyed day after day. Now, let us hear the tale of the ass and the frogs. An ass, burdened with a load of wood, was crossing a pond. As he made his way through the water, he lost his footing, stumbled, and fell. Unable to rise due to his heavy load, he groaned heavily. The frogs swimming in the pond heard his cries and remarked, quote, "What would you do if you had to live here as we do, when you make such a fuss about just falling into the water?" This story reminds us that people often handle minor grievances with less grace than they do major misfortunes. Next is the story of the crow and the raven. Crow was envious of the raven, who was regarded as a bird of good omen. The raven always caught the attention of people, who looked to his flight to predict the coming good or bad events. "We were foolish to allow the man to take even a single branch from our home. Now he has turned it against us." The cedar replied, "It is not the branches that are to blame, but our own trust in a stranger who came among us seeking advantage. We must learn to be wary of those who charm us with flattery, for they may wield tools that threaten our very existence." This story teaches us the importance of vigilance and the dangers of misplaced trust. If we hadn't relinquished our claim to the ash tree, we might have preserved our own rights and stood tall for generations. The wolves and the sheepdogs. The wolves addressed the sheepdogs, saying, "Why is it that, despite our many similarities, you cannot fully unite with us and live like brothers? Our only difference lies in this: we embrace freedom, while you submit to men and serve them. For your efforts, they repay you with whips and collars, forcing you to guard their sheep. While they feast on the mutton, they toss you only the bones. If you truly consider our words, you will hand over the sheep to us, and together we can indulge until we are all satisfied." The dogs found these ideas tempting and ventured into the wolves' den, only to be met with betrayal and savagely torn apart. In another tale, a bull came across a lion's cub sleeping peacefully and, with a swift motion, gored him to death with his powerful horns. The lioness approached, mourning deeply for her lost cub. Noticing her sorrow, a wild boar hunter observed from a distance and remarked, "Consider how many men there are who mourn the loss of their children, deaths that you have caused." In another story, a highly skilled bowman ventured into the mountains in search of game. Once more, but all the forest creatures fled at his approach. Only the lion dared to challenge him. The bowman quickly released an arrow, whispering how many men there are who mourn the loss of their children, deaths that you have caused. Wounded, the lion ran away in fear. Fox, witnessing the scene, urged him to be brave and not retreat at the first sign of danger. The lion replied, "Your advice is in vain. If such a fearful messenger has come from him, how can withstand the man himself? Be vigilant against those who can strike from afar." The camel. When man first encountered the camel, he was so taken aback by its immense size that he ran away. But eventually, as he observed the beast's meekness and gentle nature, he gathered enough courage to approach it. Shortly thereafter, noticing that this creature lacked any spirit or fight, he became bold enough to place a bridle in its mouth and even let a child take the reins. In time, familiarity can conquer fear. The crab and the fox crab, leaving the shore behind, decided to make a lush green meadow his place to feed. It wasn't long before a hungry fox stumbled upon him and devoured him whole. Just before meeting his end, the crab lamented, "Truly deserve this fate. What was doing on land when by my very nature and habits am meant for the sea?" Finding contentment in our circumstances is key to true happiness. The ass and the old shepherd one day. As a shepherd kept a watchful eye on his ass grazing in a meadow, he was suddenly alarmed by the cries of an approaching enemy. The fox, struggling to respond, gasped, "Oh, dear hedgehog, what good would that do? Am already defeated, and the pain endure is far beyond mere annoyance. While the flies may add to my suffering, they are not the source of my despair." The hedgehog paused, considering this. "But surely, my friend, even in your state, a little relief from your tormentors could grant you a moment's peace." The fox sighed deeply. "You speak wisely, hedgehog, but fear my plight goes far deeper than just the insects that plague me. There is little point in addressing the minor troubles when the greater storm rages within. Still, I would appreciate your kindness." With that, the hedgehog took it upon himself to help the fox, fanning away the flies with his prickly quills. As the buzzing pests dispersed, the fox felt a flicker of gratitude for the small comfort that the hedgehog provided. In time, however, the fox realized that no matter how many flies were driven away, his true battle was with his own helplessness. Sometimes, the greatest struggles cannot be alleviated by mere distractions or temporary relief. The lesson here is that while it's noble to help others with their troubles, we must also be aware that some battles lie within and require more than just external aid. True healing often comes from addressing the root of the pain. "By no means," replied the fox. "Please, do not disturb them." "What's this?" asked the hedgehog. "Do you not wish to be rid of them?" "Not at all," returned the fox. "You see, these flies are already full and only sting me a little. If you get rid of them, continue. More hungry ones will come to take their place, and they will drain every last drop of blood have left." The woman and her hen. Once there was a woman who owned a hen that laid an egg for her every single day. She often found herself contemplating how she might manage to get 2 eggs a day instead of just 1. Eventually, in her quest for more, she decided to give the hen a double portion of barley. From that day on, the hen became fat and sleek, but never laid another egg again. The kites and the swans. In ancient times, both the kites and the swans were known to have the gift of song. However, after they heard the horse neighing, they became so enchanted by that sound that they tried to imitate it. In their attempts to neigh, they forgot how to sing altogether. The pursuit of imagined gains often comes at the expense of present blessings. The dog and the hare. One day, a hound chased a hare up a hillside, pursuing her for quite a distance. At times, he nipped at her as if he intended to take her life, while at other moments, he playfully fawned on her, as if he were just another dog engaging in a game. Confused by his behavior, the hare said to him, "Wish you would be sincere with me and reveal your true self. If you are my friend, why do you bite me so fiercely? If you are my enemy, then why do you act so amiably? After all, no one can truly be called a friend if it's unclear whether to trust or distrust them." The hares and the foxes. The hares found themselves at war with the eagles and sought assistance from the foxes. The foxes replied, "We would gladly help you, but we know who you are and who you are fighting against. It is wise to assess the situation before committing to a course of action." The bull and the calf. Bull was struggling with all his might to squeeze through a narrow passage that led to his stall. Young calf approached the bull and offered to lead the way through the narrow passage. "You can spare yourself the effort." The bull replied, "I've known this path long before you were even born. Now, let me share the tale of the stag, the wolf, and the sheep." Stag once approached a sheep, asking her to lend him a measure of wheat, with the wolf as his guarantor. The sheep, sensing some deceit, declined politely, saying, "The wolf is known to take what he desires and vanish without a trace. And you, too, can easily outrun me with your swift legs. How would ever find you when the time for repayment comes? It's true, 2 wrongs never make a right." Lastly, we have the eagle, the cat, and the wild sow. An eagle built her nest high atop a towering oak tree. Meanwhile, a cat discovered a cozy hole in the trunk and settled down in the middle, while a wild sow and her piglets found refuge in a hollow at the base of the tree. With cunning intent, the cat plotted to disrupt this unlikely community. To execute her plan, the cat climbed to the eagle's nest and said, "Destruction is looming for both of us. I'm afraid. The wild sow, whom you see daily digging in the earth, it intends to uproot this oak so that when it falls, she can seize our families as food for her piglets." With those words, she frightfully rattled the eagle's confidence. Next, she crept down to the sow's den and warned, "Your piglets are in grave danger. As soon as you venture out to forage for food, the eagle is poised to swoop down and snatch one of your little ones." Having planted these fearful thoughts in the sow's mind, the cat pretended to hide in the hollow of the tree. When night arrived, she stealthily ventured out, gathering food for herself and her kittens, all the while feigning fear as she kept watch throughout the day. The eagle, consumed by her fear of the sow, remained perched on the branches, while the sow, terrified of the eagle, dared not leave her den. And so, both the sow and the eagle, along with their families, ultimately succumbed to hunger. providing ample sustenance for the cat and her kittens. Once upon a time, there was a very large and strong wolf born among the wolves. He surpassed all of his fellow wolves in strength, size, and swiftness, which led them to unanimously call him Lion. The wolf, lacking the sense proportional to his enormous size, mistakenly believed they had named him earnestly. He abandoned his own kind and chose to associate exclusively with lions. Observing this behavior, an old sly fox remarked, "May never become as ridiculous as you, engulfed in pride and self-conceit. For even though you may have the size of a lion among wolves, in a herd of lions, you are definitively still just a wolf." Meanwhile, Frolicsome, from a lack of work and an excess of grain, galloped about in a rather extravagant way and said to himself, "My father must have been a thoroughbred racer and surely inherited his speed and spirit." However, the very next day, after being compelled to endure a long journey, feeling utterly exhausted, he lamented, "Must have been mistaken, but that is not true. My father, after all, could only have been an ass." Meanwhile, a prophet among the marketplace, offering to tell fortunes to people passing by. Suddenly, a frantic individual rushed toward him, breathless, and informed him that the doors of his home had been broken open and that his possessions were being stolen away. The prophet sighed heavily and sprinted away, eager to reach his house as quickly as possible. Observing his hasty departure, a nearby neighbor called out, "Hey, you there! You claim to foresee the fortunes of others. How is it that you didn't foresee your own?" In a different corner of the world, there were two frogs living as neighbors. One resided in a deep pond, well hidden from the public's eye, while the other dwelled in a small gully with barely any water, situated along a country road. The frog that lived in the pond urged his friend to change his home, insisting that he would be safer and have more food if he came to live with him. The other frog, however, stubbornly refused, lamenting how difficult it would be to leave a place he had grown accustomed to. Just a few days later, a heavy wagon rumbled through the gully and crushed him beneath its wheels. It's true that a stubborn person will often stick to their choices, even to their own detriment. In another tale, a serpent and an eagle were locked in a fierce struggle, and with the serpent gaining the upper hand and preparing to strangle the bird, a farmer happened upon the scene and rushed in, freeing the eagle from the serpent's grasp. Furious at losing its prey, the serpent injected poison into the farmer's drinking horn. Unaware of the danger, the farmer was about to take a sip when the eagle swooped down, striking his hand with its wing, and grasping the horn in its talons, and female spread became pregnant, carried it high into the sky. The crow and the pitcher thirsty crow, on the brink of perishing, spotted a pitcher, and female spread became pregnant, flew toward it. However, upon reaching it, he was disheartened to find that it contained so little water that he could not reach it. He tried everything he could think of to quench his thirst, but all his efforts were in vain. Finally, he gathered as many stones as he could carry and began dropping them one by one into the pitcher. With each stone, the water level rose until it was within his reach, and he was able to save his life. Necessity is the mother of invention. The thief and the innkeeper thief rented a room at a tavern and lingered there, hoping to steal something that would allow him to pay his bill. After spending several days in vain, he noticed the innkeeper sitting outside his door, dressed in a new and handsome coat. The thief sat down next to him and struck up a conversation. As their discussion waned, the thief stretched dramatically and let out an exaggerated yawn, while howling like a wolf at the same time. The innkeeper said to him, "Why do you howl so fearfully?" "I will tell you," replied the thief. "But first, please hold my clothes, or might tear them to shreds. I don't know when developed this habit of yawning, nor whether these howling fits are a punishment for my sins, or due to some other cause. But do know this, when I yawn for the third time, transform into a wolf and attack people." With that, he began to yawn again, dramatically, and howled like a wolf, just as he had before. The innkeeper, listening to his story and believing every word, became extremely frightened. He jumped up from his seat and tried to flee. The thief grabbed hold of his coat, pleading, "Please wait, sir, and hold on to my clothes." The thief grabbed him by the coat. "I will rip them apart in my rage when turned into a wolf." Simultaneously, he yawned for the third time and unleashed a gut-wrenching howl. The innkeeper, terrified at the prospect of being attacked, left his new coat in the thief's grasp and dashed as fast as he could toward the inn for safety. The thief seized the opportunity and vanished with the coat, never to return to the inn again. Not every tale is worth believing. Once upon a time, a hart, hard-pressed by the chase, sought refuge beneath the large leaves of a vine. The huntsmen, in their frantic pursuit, overshot the spot where the hart was hiding. Thinking he was safe, the hart began to nibble on the tendrils of the vine. But one of the huntsmen, drawn by the sound of rustling leaves, turned around, spotted the hart, and loosed an arrow from his bow, striking the creature. As the hart lay dying, he groaned, "Deserve this fate, for should never have mistreated the vine that sheltered me." In another tale, a gnat approached a lion and boldly declared, "Have no fear of you at all. Nor are you truly stronger then. What does your strength amount to? Anyway, you can scratch with your claws and bite with your teeth during a woman's quarrels. Assert that I am far more powerful than you. And if you doubt this, let us fight and see who will emerge victorious." The gnat, having sounded his horn, clung to the lion and stung him on his nostrils and the hairless parts of his face. In his attempt to crush the little creature, the lion ended up tearing himself with his own claws, causing himself great harm. Thus, the gnat triumphed over the lion, buzzing with a triumphant song, flew away. It wasn't long before he became ensnared in a cobweb and was devoured by a spider. He lamented his fate. "Woe is me. Here am, able to successfully wage war against the largest beasts, yet meet my end at the hands of this spider, the most insignificant of insects." Now, let's hear about the fox and the grapes. Famished fox spotted some clusters of ripe black grapes hanging from a trellised vine. She tried every trick in the book to get to them, but despite her efforts, not anything. She soon found herself exhausted and empty-handed, unable to reach the tempting grapes. Finally, she turned away, masking her disappointment and declaring, "The grapes are sour and not ripe as had thought." The walnut tree stood by the roadside, heavy with fruit. Unfortunately, its bounty attracted passers-by, who, in their pursuit of the nuts, broke its branches with stones and sticks. In a fit of despair, the walnut tree lamented, "O wretched me! Those whom nourish with my fruit repay my kindness with such painful returns." Meanwhile, a kid returning home from the pasture without any protection found himself being chased by a wolf. Realizing he couldn't escape, he bravely turned around and said, "I know, dear wolf, it may be your prey, but before meet my end, and if you would play me a tune that might dance to?" The wolf agreed, and as he began to pipe, the kid joyfully danced. However, the sound of music attracted the attention of nearby hounds, who raced toward them, leading to a frantic chase for the wolf. Turning to the kid, in a very confused voice, the wolf said, "This is exactly what you deserve. For someone who is merely a butcher should not have tried to play the piper just to amuse you. Now let me tell you a story about a monkey and a dolphin. A sailor, embarking on a long voyage, brought along a monkey to entertain him while at sea. As they sailed off the coast of Greece, a fierce storm arose, wrecking the ship and leaving the sailor, the monkey, and the entire crew to swim for their lives. Dolphin, seeing the monkey struggling against the waves and mistaking him for a human, came to his aid, allowing the monkey to ride safely on his back toward the shore. When the dolphin reached land, not far from Athens, he asked the monkey if he was an Athenian. The monkey replied that he was, and boasted of being descended from one of the most noble families in that esteemed city. Curious, The dolphin then asked if the monkey was familiar with the Piraeus, the famed harbor of Athens. Thinking he was meant to befriend the doves, the jackdaw claimed to know them well and that they were close friends. The doves, however, were not fooled by his pretenses. Outraged by his deceit, they chased him away. Now, let's shift to the story of the horse and the stag. Once, the horse enjoyed the entire plain all to himself. That was until a stag wandered into his territory and began to share his pasture. Enraged by this intrusion, the horse sought revenge and approached a nearby man, asking for his assistance in punishing the stag. The man replied that if the horse would allow him to put a bit in his mouth and ride him, he would devise effective means to defeat the stag. Eager for revenge, the horse agreed and let the man mount him. Yet, from that moment on, the man replied that if the horse would allow him to put a bit in his mouth and ride him, he would devise effective means to defeat the stag. He discovered that instead of avenging himself upon the stag, he had effectively enslaved himself to the service of man. Let's now dive into the tale of the jackdaw and the doves. Jackdaw, upon discovering a group of doves living in a cote with an abundance of food, decided to paint himself white and join them, hoping to share in their plentiful resources. The doves, as long as he remained silent, would do so, believed him to be one of their own, and welcomed him into their cote. But one day, he grew careless and began to chatter, revealing his true nature. The doves quickly expelled him, pecking at him with their beaks. Unable to find food among the doves, he returned to the jackdaws. However, they too, not recognizing him due to his new color, cast him out from their group. In trying to achieve two goals, he ended up with neither. Now, let's hear about the fox and the monkey. Fox and a monkey were traveling together on the same road. As they made their way, they came across a cemetery filled with monuments. "All these monuments you see," said the monkey, "are erected in honor of my ancestors, who were once freedmen and citizens of great renown." The fox replied, "You have chosen the perfect topic for your tall tales, as I'm sure none of your ancestors are around to contradict you. False tale often reveals its own flaws. The man and his wife once upon a time. There was a man whose wife was hated by everyone in his household. Curious to see if she had the same effect on those in her father's home, he concocted a pretext to send her for a visit. When she returned shortly after, he asked her how the visit went and how the servants had treated her. She replied, "The herdsmen and shepherds looked at me with disdain." He responded, "Oh, my wife, if you were disliked by those who rise early in the morning to tend to their flocks and return late in the day, imagine how those who spent all day with you must have felt." Small sign often reveals the truth about a situation. The man, the horse, the ox, and the dog. One day, a horse, an ox, and a dog, all struggling in the bitter cold, sought refuge and protection from a man. He welcomed them warmly, built a fire, and provided them with warmth. The horse feasted on his oats, the ox enjoyed an abundance of hay, and the dog dined on meat from the man's own table. Grateful for these favors, the animals decided to repay him in the best way they could. To achieve this, they divided the span of the man's life among themselves, each one endowing a portion with the traits that define them. The horse claimed the early years, imbuing them with his own characteristics. Thus, every young person is often impetuous, headstrong, and stubborn in defending their views. The ox took charge of the middle years, which is why men in their prime are usually hard workers, devoted to their tasks, and determined to accumulate wealth and manage their resources wisely. The dog was assigned the final years of life, explaining why older men can be irritable, grouchy, hard to satisfy, and self-centered, often only tolerant of their own family while being averse to strangers and those who don't contribute to their comfort or needs. The thief and the house dog. One night, a thief attempted to break into a house. He brought several slices of meat with him to pacify the house dog, hoping that it wouldn't bark and alert its master. As the thief tossed the pieces of meat towards the dog, it replied, "If you think that you can silence me with this, you are sorely mistaken. Your sudden generosity will only make me more vigilant. I suspect that beneath these unexpected favors, you have your own interests in mind, which could ultimately harm my master." The apes and the two travelers. Two men were traveling together. One always spoke the truth, while the other could only tell lies. By chance. And then, they entered the land of the apes. An ape, who had declared himself king, summoned them to be brought before him, so he could hear what people were saying about him. He ordered that all the apes be arranged in a long line on either side of him, and that a throne be placed for him. Just as was customary among humans. After these preparations, the king signaled for the two men to be brought before him and greeted them with this question: "What do you think of me as a king?" "Strangers?" The line traveler replied, "You appear to me to be a most mighty king." "And what do you think of those surrounding me?" he asked. "These, the line traveler responded, "are worthy companions of yours, fit at least to be ambassadors and leaders of armies." Pleased by this flattery, the ape commanded that a handsome gift be presented to the liar. Observing this, the truthful traveler thought to himself, if such a great reward is given for a lie, what kind of gift might receive if tell the truth? As is my custom. Just then, the ape turned his attention to him. "And how do you perceive me and my friends here?" asked the ape. "You are," the lying traveler replied, "a most remarkable ape, and all your companions, following your lead, are excellent apes as well." Enraged by this truth, the king of the apes commanded that the lying traveler be turned over to the fangs and claws of his companions. The fox and the lion once, a fox who had never encountered a lion before, stumbled upon one in the forest. He was so terrified that he nearly fainted from fear. The next time he met the lion, he was still quite alarmed, but not to the same degree as the first encounter. By the third meeting, he had gained enough confidence to approach the lion and strike up a casual conversation. Familiarity, it seems, softens prejudice. The weasel and the mice. An aging weasel, now too frail to catch mice as he used to, decided to roll in flour and lie down in a dark corner. The weasel and the mice. An aging weasel, now too frail to catch mice like he used to, decided to roll in flour and lie down in a dark corner. Mouse, mistaking him for food, leaped onto him and was instantly caught and squeezed to death. Another mouse met the same fate, and then a third, along with several others that followed. An old mouse, who had cleverly evaded many traps and snares, observed this cunning trick from a safe distance and remarked, "You lying there. May you prosper just in proportion to how well you pretend to be what you aren't." The boy, bathing in a river, found himself in danger of drowning. He called out to a passing traveler for help, but instead of offering a helping hand, the man stood by casually and scolded the boy for his carelessness. "Oh, sir," cried the youth, "please help me now and scold me later. After all, advice without assistance is of no value." The Peacock and Juno. The peacock complained to Juno that, while the nightingale charmed every ear with its song, he himself became a laughingstock as soon as he opened his mouth. The goddess, seeking to comfort him, responded, "But you surpass all in beauty and size. The brilliance of the emerald shines upon your neck, and your tail unfurls in a magnificent display of colorful plumage. But what good is it," the peacock replied to Juno, "to possess this silent beauty if I'm outdone in song? The fates have determined each creature's gifts. Juno explained, "To you they have given beauty, to the eagle they have given strength, to the nightingale the gift of song, to the raven favorable omens, to the crow unfavorable ones. Each of these beings is content with the gifts assigned to them." The wolf and the shepherd wolf had been trailing a flock of sheep for quite some time, yet he never attempted to harm a single one of them. Initially, the shepherd kept a watchful eye on him, treating him as a potential enemy and remaining vigilant over his every move. But as the wolf continued to stay close to the flock without a hint of malice, day after day, the shepherd gradually shifted his perception. He began to view the wolf not as a threat, but as a protector of his sheep. So, when an urgent matter called him into the city one day, he entrusted the entire flock to the wolf's care. Seizing this opportunity, the wolf unleashed his true nature, attacking and devastating the majority of the flock. Upon returning to find his sheep decimated, the shepherd lamented, "I have brought this upon myself. Why did place my trust in a wolf?" The hares and the lions convened in assembly, passionately advocating for equality among all creatures. The lions listened and responded, "Your words, dear hares, are admirable. However, you lack the claws and teeth that we possess." Realizing the futility of his pleas, resigned himself to his fate. The fox and the grapes. A hungry fox came across a vine laden with ripe grapes. After several attempts to reach the luscious fruit, he grew frustrated and finally gave up. As he walked away, he muttered to himself, "Those grapes were probably sour anyway." The tortoise and the hare. The confident hare quickly sprinted ahead, while the slow-moving tortoise plodded along steadily. Overcome with arrogance, the hare decided to take a nap, believing he had ample time to win. However, when he awoke, he saw the tortoise nearing the finish line. Despite his quickness, the hare could not catch up in time. And the tortoise won the race. Would truly lose my senses if we were to abandon the food have in my grasp, all for the sake of chasing after birds that aren't even in sight yet. The lark and her young ones. Lark had built her nest in early spring among the young green wheat. Her chicks had nearly reached full strength, developed their wings, and gained their beautiful feathers. One day, the owner of the field, surveying his ripe crop, said, "It's time for me to ask all my neighbors for help with the harvest." One of the young larks overheard this and shared it with his mother, asking where they should go for safety. "No need to move just yet, my son, and now I may promise to save you." The man who only calls on his friends for help with the harvest isn't truly serious. Few days later, the owner returned to find the wheat shedding its grain due to overripeness. "Thank you, dear fox, but must decline your invitation. I know your kind too well. You may be charming, you may be funny, but I'm not foolish enough to trust you." The fox, undeterred, continued to flatter the cock, assuring him that they could have a delightful conversation if only he would come down. Just then, the dog, having overheard the exchange, lifted his head and called out, "Don't listen to him, my feathered friend. The fox may seem friendly, but remember that he is always hungry and looking for a meal. Stay up in that tree where it's safe." The cock, eating the dog's warning, said, "Thank you for your guidance, old friend. I shall remain up here, where can see and be safe from any trickery." The fox, realizing his plan had been thwarted, scowled and eventually slinked away, muttering to himself, "Clever pair. I'll have to be more cunning in the future." And from that day on, the dog and the cock became even closer friends, always watching out for one another, proving that true friendship is about looking out for each other, especially in times of danger. "Sir, I would appreciate it if you could go around to the hollow trunk below me and wake my porter so he can open the door and let you in." As the fox approached the tree, the dog sprang out and seized him, tearing him apart. In another meadow, the geese and the cranes were feeding when a bird catcher arrived to ensnare them in his nets. The cranes, being lighter and more agile, took flight and escaped, while the heavier geese, unable to flee as quickly, were caught. In a different tale, an ass grazing in a meadow noticed a wolf approaching. To save himself, he pretended to be lame. The wolf, coming closer, asked about the cause of his lameness. The ass explained that he had stepped on a sharp thorn while passing through a hedge. He requested the wolf to remove it, for fear that it might injure his throat when the wolf decided to eat him. The wolf agreed and lifted the ass's foot, focusing intently on finding the thorn. In that moment, the ass kicked with his powerful hind legs, sending the wolf staggering back, his teeth clashing together in a painful clatter. Seizing the opportunity, the ass galloped away. The wolf, nursing his wounds, lamented, "Deserved this. Why did I attempt the art of healing when all my father ever taught me was the craft of a butcher?" In another story, a man owned both a goat and an ass. The goat, envious of the ass for having access to more food, remarked, "How shamefully you are treated. You spend one moment grinding grain in the mill and the next carrying heavy loads." The goat then advised the ass to pretend to have a seizure and fall into a ditch in order to rest. The ass took the goat's advice, but when he fell into the ditch, he sustained serious injuries. The man, worried about his ass, called for a doctor who suggested applying the lungs of a goat to heal the wounds. Tragically, they killed the goat to help the ass recover. The lion and the bull. Once upon a time, a lion, eager to capture a bull, yet fearful of the bull's massive size, devised a cunning plan to ensure his demise. He approached the bull and said, "I have just slain a splendid sheep, my friend. If you come to my lair and share in the feast, would be thrilled to have your company." The lion hoped as the bull settled down to eat, he could seize the opportunity to attack and make a meal of him. However, as the bull approached the lion's den, he noticed large spits and giant cauldrons, but no sign of the promised sheep. Without uttering a word, he quietly turned and left. The lion, perplexed, asked why the bull departed so abruptly without offering any greeting to his host, who had not given him cause for offense. "I have more than enough reasons," replied the bull. "See no evidence whatsoever of you having slaughtered a sheep, while it is quite clear that you have made all the preparations to feast on a bull." The Fox and the Mask. Fox entered the home of an actor and, while rummaging through his props, stumbled upon a mask, a remarkable imitation of a human head. He placed his paws on it and said, "What a beautiful head! Yet it holds no value, like Kasharimond, for it is completely devoid of brains." The Grasshopper and the Owl. An owl, used to feeding at night and sleeping during the day, was greatly disturbed by the incessant noise of a grasshopper and earnestly begged her to stop chirping. The grasshopper refused to relent, and the louder the owl pleaded, the more the grasshopper chirped. When the owl realized she could not find relief and that her words were being ignored, she devised a clever plan. "Since cannot sleep," she said, "because of your song, which, believe me, is as sweet as Apollo's lyre, shall treat myself to some nectar that Pallas recently bestowed upon me. If you don't mind, come to me and we can share it together." The grasshopper, emerging from her hollow, swiftly caught her and brought her to her end. But the fowler, equipped with bird lime and twigs, set out to capture birds. Spotting a thrush perched on a tree, he wished to snare it. He adjusted his twigs to the right length and watched closely, his full attention fixed skyward. In doing so, he inadvertently stepped on a viper that was sleeping at his feet. the viper turned and bit him, causing him to faint. As he lay there, the man lamented, "Woe is me, while aimed to hunt another, have unknowingly fallen into the snares of death myself." The horse and the ass, proud horse, flaunting his fine trappings, crossed paths with an ass on the road. The ass, burdened with a heavy load, moved slowly out of the way. "Hardly," said the horse, "can resist kicking you with my heels." The ass remained silent, making only a quiet appeal to the justice of the gods. Not long afterward, however, the horse, having become out of breath, was sent by his owner to the farm. The ass, seeing him drawing a dung cart, couldn't help but mock him. "Where, O boastful one, are now all your fine trappings? You who once looked down on me have now been reduced to the very state you scorned." The lion and the three bulls. 3 bulls had been pasturing together for a long time. Lion lay in ambush, hoping to make them his prey, but he was afraid to attack while they remained united. Eventually, through deceitful words, he managed to separate them. No longer protected by their unity, he pounced on them one by one as they fed alone, enjoying his feast at his own leisure. Remember, unity is strength. The wolf and the goat. Wolf spotted a goat grazing at the top of a steep precipice where he could not reach her. Only a couple of small ones had been caught, and the rest was just a tangle of seaweed and rubbish. Disappointed, they lamented, "Alas, we were so hopeful. All our efforts have led to nothing but this meager haul." The fox and the grapes. Hungry fox was roaming through the vineyards. He spotted a bunch of grapes hanging from a lofty vine, their color shining like emeralds in the sunlight. He leaped up to grab them, but they were just out of reach. After several tries, he finally gave up. In frustration, he said to himself, "Those grapes are probably sour anyway." The tortoise and the hare. The tortoise was fed up with the hare boasting about his speed. So, the tortoise proposed a race, convinced that he could win. The hare, amused, accepted the challenge. They set off, and the hare quickly zoomed ahead, leaving the tortoise far behind. Confident of his victory, the hare decided to take a nap. Meanwhile, the tortoise kept moving steadily along. When the hare woke up, he saw the tortoise nearing the finish line. Panic-stricken, he raced towards the end, but it was too late. The tortoise had already crossed the finish line, proving that slow and steady wins the race. The moral of the story: never underestimate those who seem slow or less capable. And remember, unity is strength, for together we can overcome any challenge. The nets were filled with sand and stones, and the men were incredibly disheartened by the disappointment that had befallen them, particularly because their expectations had been so high. One of the men, an old man, spoke up, saying, "Let us stop lamenting, my friends, for, as see it, sorrow is always the twin sister of joy." It was only to be expected that we, who were just now filled with such exuberance, should next be faced with something to make us sad. In a different tale, a country mouse once invited a town mouse, a close friend, to visit and enjoy his humble country fare. As they sat on the bare fields, feasting on wheat stalks and roots dug up from the hedgerow, the town mouse turned to his friend and said, "You live here the life of the ants, while my home is filled with abundance. Appreciate your generous hospitality, but this constant threat and fear of danger is too much for me. I cannot enjoy the feast when my heart is racing with anxiety. I would much rather return to my simple life in the country, where I can eat my meager meals in peace without the fear of being hunted." The town mouse, surprised but understanding, replied, "But my dear friend, don't you see, this is the price we pay for living in luxury. There may be risks, but the rewards are great. Surely, you cannot prefer a dull existence over this vibrant life filled with delightful tastes and experiences." The country mouse shook his head, resolute. "I've realized that true happiness lies not in the excess of luxury, but in the comfort of familiar surroundings. Choose safety and simplicity over the opulence that comes with fear." And with that, the country mouse bid farewell to the town mouse and made his way back to the tranquility of the countryside. Forever grateful for the experience, but even more grateful for the peace that came with his humble lifestyle. Although you've laid out such a delightful feast for me, I must decline and leave you to enjoy it alone. It's surrounded by too many dangers for my liking. I prefer the simplicity of my bare plowlands and the roots from the hedgerow, where I can live safely without fear. The wolf, the fox, and the ape. Wolf accused a fox of stealing, but the fox adamantly denied the accusation, and ape volunteered to mediate the dispute. After both parties had presented their cases, the ape delivered his verdict. Don't believe you, wolf. Ever lost what you claim? And do believe you, fox, to have taken what you so bravely deny. Those who are dishonest do not earn respect, even when they act with integrity. The wasps, the partridges, and the farmer. The wasps and the partridges, parched with thirst, approached a farmer and pleaded for a drink of water. They promised to repay him for his kindness. The partridges claimed that they would tend to his vines, enhancing the quality of his grapes. The wasps proclaimed that they would stand watch and fend off any thieves with their stings. However, the farmer interrupted them, saying, "Already have 2 oxen who, without making any promises, do all of these things. It is certainly better for me to give water to them than to you." The brother and the sister. Father had 1 son and 1 daughter. The son was notable for his good looks, while the daughter was distinguished by her extraordinary ugliness. One day, while playing as children, they happened to glance into a mirror placed on their mother's chair. The boy admired his good looks, while the girl became enraged, unable to endure her brother's self-praise, interpreting everything he said, as she could hardly do otherwise, as a slight against herself. Furious, she ran to her father to seek revenge on her brother, spitefully accusing him of having, as a boy, once more, entitlements, made use of things that belonged only to girls. The father embraced them both, showering his kisses and affection on each impartially, and said, "Wish you both would look into the mirror every day. You, my son, so that you do not spoil your beauty with bad behavior, and you, my daughter, so that you can make up for your lack of beauty with your virtues." The dogs and the fox. Some dogs stumbled upon the skin of a lion and began tearing it to pieces with their teeth. Nearby fox observed this and remarked, "If this lion were alive, you would soon discover that his claws are far stronger than your teeth. It's easy to kick someone when they're down." The blind man and the whelp. Blind man had a knack for identifying different animals by touching them. One day, soon from then, a whelp of a wolf was brought to him, along with a request for him to feel it and identify its species. He examined it, and unsure of its identity, replied, "Can't quite tell if it's the coat of a fox or the whelp of a wolf, but this much know for certain. It would not be safe to admit him to the sheepfold." Evil tendencies are often evident from an early age. A cobbler turned doctor. Cobbler, soon from then, unable to make a living from his trade and desperate due to poverty, began to practice medicine in a town where he was unknown. He sold a potion, claiming it to be an antidote to all poisons, and earned himself quite a reputation through elaborate advertisements and grandiose claims. However, when the cobbler himself fell seriously ill, the governor of the town decided to test his skills. He called for a cup, and while filling it with water, pretended to mix poison with the cobbler's so-called antidote, instructing him to drink it in exchange for a reward. Faced with the fear of death, the cobbler admitted that he had no knowledge of medicine and that his fame was solely due to the foolish claims of the crowd. The governor then called a public assembly and addressed the citizens. "What folly have you indulged in?" Wolf, emerging from a field of oats, encountered a horse and said, "I would recommend you go into that field. It's filled with delicious oats, which have left untouched just for you. My friend, would love to see you enjoy a good meal." The horse replied, If oats were the diet of wolves, you wouldn't be so generous with your ears at the expense of your belly. Those with a bad reputation often find that when they do a good deed, they receive no recognition for it. In another tale, there were two men who were bitter enemies, yet found themselves sailing together in the same vessel, determined to keep their distance. One sat at the stern, while the other nestled himself at the prow. Suddenly, a violent storm erupted, threatening to sink the ship. The man in the stern called out to the pilot, asking which end of the vessel would capsize first. The lion, quiet and composed, simply gazed at the fox, exercising patience in the face of mockery. The fox, a little intoxicated with a sense of false bravery, it shouted taunts with each passing moment, unfazed by the power that lay within the cage. However, as the day wore on, the lion finally spoke, delivering a wise lesson wrapped in authority. Do not confuse my confinement with weakness, nor mistake your boldness for courage, he said calmly. You may taunt me now because you believe cannot reach you. However, those who take pleasure in belittling others often find themselves in perilous situations when the tables are turned. With that, the fox, realizing his folly, scurried away, leaving behind the lesson that true strength lies not in deriding the powerless, but in understanding the depths of one's own courage. The lion addressed the fox. It is not you who insults me. It's the misfortune that has befallen me. Once upon a time, a frog emerged from his home in the marsh and declared to all the creatures that he was a learned physician, skilled in the art of medicine and capable of curing all ailments. Fox challenged him, saying, "How can you claim to prescribe for others when you cannot even heal your own lameness and wrinkled skin?" In another tale, a lion growing old lay ill in his cave. All the beasts came to pay their respects to their king, except for the fox. This gave the wolf an opportunity, and he accused the fox before the lion of failing to show respect to their ruler by not visiting. Just then, the fox entered and overheard the wolf's accusation. The lion, roaring with rage at the fox, searched for a chance to defend himself. The fox quickly responded, "Who among all those who have come to you has served you better than me, have traveled far and wide, seeking out physicians and learning the secrets of healing?" The lion, intrigued, demanded to know the cure. The fox replied. The wolf was promptly captured and flayed. With a sly smile, the fox turned to him and remarked, "You should have inspired your master to act for good, rather than ill." As for the dog, one winter, he curled up tightly to keep warm and decided it was time to build himself a house. But when summer returned, he lay stretched out, checking among friends, feeling grand and large in comparison to his previous form. Now he considered that building a house to accommodate him would neither be easy nor necessary. The north wind and the sun were embroiled in a dispute over who was the mightier. They agreed that the victor would be the one who could first strip a wayfaring man of his clothes. The north wind took his turn first and unleashed all his power, blowing with all his might. However, the harder he blew, the tighter the traveler wrapped his cloak around himself. Finally, realizing he had no hope of victory, the wind called upon the sun to show what he could do. The sun suddenly poured forth all his warmth. As soon as the traveler felt the sun's gentle rays, he began to shed one garment after another, and eventually, overwhelmed by the heat, he completely undressed and bathed in a stream that lay in his path. This tale teaches us that persuasion is far more effective than force. As for the crow caught in a snare, he prayed to Apollo for release, promising to offer some frankincense at his shrine. But when the crow was freed from his danger, he quickly forgot his promise. Not long after, he found himself ensnared again, and as he passed near Apollo, he made the same promise to offer frankincense to Mercury. Mercury soon appeared and addressed him, saying, "You most deceitful creature, how can trust you when you have cast aside your former benefactor? Now let me tell you about the fox and the crane." One day, a fox invited a crane to dinner, but provided nothing more than soup made from pulses, served in a flat, wide dish. As the crane attempted to eat, the soup spilled from his long bill with each mouthful, leaving him quite vexed, while the fox found the whole situation amusing. In retaliation, the crane invited the fox to his home for dinner. This time, he presented a flagon with a long, narrow opening, perfectly designed for the crane to comfortably reach in and enjoy the contents at his leisure. The fox, however, was unable to taste even a drop, receiving a deserved lesson in hospitality. A wolf and the lion roaming by the mountainside at sundown. A wolf saw his own shadow grow long and magnified. He thought to himself, "Why should, appearing so immense and stretching nearly an acre in length, why should I not be afraid of the lion? Shouldn't be acknowledged as the king of all the gathered beasts." While he reveled in these proud thoughts, a lion suddenly attacked him and killed him. In his final moments, he lamented, "Wretched me! This overestimation of myself is what led to my destruction. The birds, the beasts, and the bat." The birds waged war against the beasts, and each side claimed victory in turn. Bat, fearing the uncertain outcomes of the battle, always fought on the side he believed to be stronger. When peace was finally declared, his deceitful behavior became clear to both factions. "Am but a mere trumpeter, and my role is to inspire my comrades, not to engage in battle. Should you execute me, who will rally your enemies with courage? Spare me, and conserve your needs." His captors, moved by his plea, decided to let him live. However, they warned him, "You may live, but remember this lesson. In times of war, it is not only the soldiers who bear arms who shape the tide of battle. Do not underestimate the power of sound and song." From that day on, the trumpeter vowed to honor his life and the freedom granted to him, never forgetting that bravery comes in many forms. Have not slain a single man from your troop. Carry no weapons. ... Just this one brass trumpet. That is precisely why you should be put to death. ... They replied. ... Even though you do not fight. ... Your trumpet inspires all the others to battle. Meanwhile, ... the owl, with her wisdom, ... advised the birds that when the acorn first began to sprout, ... they should pull it up from the ground and prevent it from growing. She warned that acorns would produce mistletoe, ... from which an inescapable poison bird lime would be extracted, ... leading to their capture. The owl then urged them to uproot the flax seeds that men had sown, ... declaring it a plant that spelled trouble, ... As the owl spotted an archer approaching, ... she foretold that this man, being on foot, ... expected to be captured by poison, would fashion darts tipped with feathers that would soar faster than the wings of the birds themselves. ... The birds paid no attention to the owl's warnings. ... They deemed her out of her mind and called her mad. ... However, as time went on and her predictions proved to be true, ... they were struck by her wisdom and began to regard her as the wisest of all birds. ... Whenever she appears, ... they look to her for knowledge, ... and ... even though she now refrains from offering them advice. ... Instead, she mourns their past folly in solitude. ... The goods and the ills. Once upon a time, all the goods were driven out by the ills from their shared stake in the affairs of humanity. ... The ills, due to their overwhelming numbers, ... had taken control of the earth. In their despair, ... the goods ascended to heaven, ... seeking righteous retribution against their oppressors. ... They pleaded with Jupiter to separate them from the ills, ... arguing that they had nothing in common and could not cohabitate. ... For their existence he is marked by perpetual conflict. They requested an everlasting decree to ensure their protection in the future. Jupiter granted their request. Decreeing that from that day forward, the ills would roam the earth in groups, while the goods would enter the abodes of humanity, one by one. This is why the ills are so plentiful. They come not alone, but in swarms, never singly. In contrast, the goods descend from Jupiter, bestowed not equally upon all, but individually and separately. Granted to those who are truly able to recognize them. The ass in the lion's skin. In a forest, an ass donned a lion's skin and took great pleasure in scaring the foolish creatures he encountered during his wanderings. Eventually, he stumbled upon a fox and attempted to frighten him as well. However, the moment the fox heard the sound of the ass's voice, he exclaimed, "Might have been frightened. Had not recognized your bray." The sparrow and the hare. One day, a hare was caught by an eagle and cried out in great distress, making sounds akin to a wailing child. Endure this fate not out of weakness, but rather out of a sense of duty and purpose. Though I am large and strong, my strength serves a greater good. Work for the benefit of mankind and, in doing so, find my own value. Your actions may be swift and fierce, but they lack the honor that comes with responsibility. In the end, it's not size that defines us, it's the choices we make. Do not wish to be ungrateful, for am loved and well cared for by men who often pat my head and shoulders. Woe is me, lamented the flea. That very patting, which you enjoy, brings me nothing but inevitable destruction. The ass and his purchaser. Man wanted to buy an ass, so he made an arrangement with the owner to try the animal out before making a purchase. He took the ass home and placed it in the straw yard with his other asses. Almost immediately, the new ass left the rest and joined the laziest and greediest of them all. Upon observing this, the man put a halter on the ass and returned it to its owner. When asked how he could possibly have made a judgment in such a short time, he replied, "I don't need a trial. I know he will be just like the one he chose as his companion." Man is known by the company he keeps. The dove and the crow. Dove, confined in a cage, was proudly boasting about the large number of young ones she had hatched. Crow, overhearing her, said, "Tss, my dear friend, stop this untimely boasting. The larger your family, the more sorrow you should feel, as they remain trapped in this prison." Tss. The man and the satyr. Man and a satyr once shared a drink to celebrate the bond of friendship they were forming. On a particularly cold winter day, as they conversed, the man put his fingers to his mouth and blew on them. Curious, the satyr asked why he was doing this. The man explained that he was trying to warm his hands, as they were freezing. Later that day, when they sat down to eat, the meal served was quite hot. The man raised one of the dishes closer to his mouth and blew on it. Again, the satyr inquired about his actions, to which the man replied that he was cooling the food because it was too hot. "I can no longer consider you a friend," said the satyr, "fellow who blows both hot and cold with the same breath." According to an ancient legend, Jupiter created the first man. The meal served was quite hot. The man raised one of the dishes closer to his mouth and blew on it. Again, the satyr inquired about his actions, to which the man replied that he was cooling the food because it was too hot. "Can no longer consider you a friend," said the satyr, "a fellow who blows both hot and cold with the same breath." According to an ancient legend, Jupiter created the first man. What happened? The man said, "I can no longer consider you a friend," said the satyr, "a fellow who blows both hot and cold with the same breath." The man raised one of the dishes closer to his mouth and blew on it. Again, the satyr inquired about his actions, to which the man replied that he was cooling the food because it was too hot. Freeze. According to an ancient legend, Jupiter created the first man when Jupiter cooled the food back and gave it to a man who oppressed the prophets that they had blamed. According to an ancient legend, Jupiter created the first man when Jupiter called the food back. Neptune crafted the first bowl, and Minerva built the first house. When their creations were complete, a dispute arose regarding who had produced the most perfect work. They decided to appoint Momus as the judge and agreed to abide by his decision. However, Momus, being envious of each craftsman's handiwork, found fault with them all. He first criticized Neptune's creation for not placing the bull's horns below its eyes, so it could better see where to strike. Then, he condemned Jupiter's creation, arguing that the heart of man should have been placed on the outside, allowing everyone to read the thoughts of the wicked and take precautions against any intended mischief. And finally, he criticized Minerva for not having designed iron wheels in the foundation of her house, allowing the inhabitants to locate more easily if a neighbor became troublesome. Jupiter, outraged by such relentless criticism, dismissed him from his role as judge and banished him from the halls of Olympus. The eagle and the jackdaw, an eagle, soaring down from his perch on a high rock, snatched a lamb and carried it high into the sky with his powerful talons. Jackdaw, who witnessed this capture, was filled with envy and resolved to match the eagle's strength and flight. He flapped his wings vigorously, circling around until he settled on a large ram, intending to carry it off as the eagle had done. However, his claws became tangled in the ram's thick fleece, rendering him unable to free himself, no matter how much he flapped and struggled. The shepherd, noticing the commotion, hurried over and caught him. Immediately, the shepherd clipped the jackdaw's wings and, taking him home at night, gave him to his children. When they asked, "Father, what kind of bird is this?" he replied, "To my certain knowledge, he is a jackdaw with my certain claws. But he would like you to think he's an eagle. Now, let me tell you about the eagle and the fox." An eagle and a fox formed an intimate friendship and decided to live close to one another. The eagle built her nest high in the branches of a tall tree, while the fox found a cozy spot in the underbrush to raise her young. Not long after they had settled into this arrangement, the eagle, in search of food for her chicks, swooped down while the fox was away and snatched one of the little cubs. She feasted on the tender meat, eating herself and her brood. When the fox returned and discovered the tragedy, she was less sorrowful over the loss of her young than frustrated by her inability to seek revenge. But justice would come swiftly for the eagle. While hovering near an altar where some villagers were sacrificing a goat, the eagle suddenly seized a piece of flesh and, along with a blazing ember, carried it back to her nest. Strong wind soon turned the spark into a flame, and the helpless eaglets, still unfledged, were roasted alive in their nest, falling dead at the bottom of the tree. There, the bitch and her whelps. Bitch, about to give birth, earnestly begged a shepherd for a place to have her litter. When her request was granted, she then sought permission to raise her puppies in the same spot. The shepherd consented once more, with vain pride, that pretty admirizing my magnificent antlers, yet have overlooked my feeble legs. The fox in the grapes spotted a bunch of grapes hanging high on a vine. He approached the vine and leaped with all his might to reach them. After several attempts, he grew weary and realized he could not reach the grapes. Frustrated, he walked away, muttering to himself, "Those grapes are probably sour anyway." The lion and the mouse. One day, a lion lay sleeping in the forest, his great head resting on his paws. Little Mouse came upon him unexpectedly and began to run up and down upon him. This soon awoke the lion, who placed his huge paw angrily on the tiny creature to kill him. The poor mouse begged him, "Please let me go and someday we'll repay you." The lion was much amused to think that a mouse could ever help him, but he was generous and finally let the mouse go. Some days later, while stalking his prey, The lion was caught in the toils of a hunter's net. Unable to free himself, he began to roar loudly. The mouse heard the cries of the lion and quickly ran to the scene. Arriving at the lion's side, the mouse said, "You laughed when said would repay you, but now you see that even a mouse can help a lion." With that, the mouse gnawed at the ropes of the net until the lion was free. The lion and the mouse became great friends, proving that kindness is never wasted. These feet, which could have saved me, which burned me, despised, while took pride in these antlers that have led to my downfall. What is truly valuable is often underestimated. The lark burying her father. According to an ancient legend, the lark was created before the earth itself. When her father passed away, there was no earth available for burial, so she left him unburied for 5 days. On the 6th day, not knowing what else to do, she buried him in her own head. Thus, her crest is said to be his grave hillock. The first duty of youth is to show reverence to their parents. The gnat and the bull. Gnat settled on the horn of a bull and lingered there for quite a while. Just as he was about to fly away, he buzzed and asked the bull if he would like him to leave. The bull replied, "I didn't even notice you were there, and won't miss you when you go." Some people believe they are more significant in their own eyes than they are in the eyes of others. The monkey and the camel. The animals of the forest put on a splendid performance, where the monkey took center stage and danced with great enthusiasm. The audience was thoroughly delighted, and when he finished, he was met with thunderous applause. However, the camel went on for a long time, feeling envious of the monkey's accolades and eager to capture the guest's favor for himself. Decided to step up and dance as well. He moved in such a ridiculous manner that the other animals were utterly appalled. In a fit of indignation, one day they attacked him with sticks and forced him out of the gathering. It is foolish to imitate those who are superior to us. The dogs and the hides group of dogs, starved with hunger, stumbled upon a number of cowhides soaking in a river. Unable to reach the hides, one day they foolishly agreed to drink up the river in hopes of getting to them. Unfortunately, they ended up bursting from drinking too much long before they could access the hides. Do not attempt the impossible. The jackdaw and the fox, half-starved jackdaw, perched himself on a fig tree, which had produced some fruit entirely out of season. One day, waiting in hope that the figs would ripen, Fox, seeing him sitting there for so long, approached and said, "You are indeed deceiving yourself. My dear sir, you are nurturing a hope so strong that it blinds you, yet it will never bring you the enjoyment you seek." Mercury and the workman, when busy chopping wood by the side of a river, accidentally let his axe slip and fall into a deep pool. Left without the means to earn his living, he sat down on the bank, mourning his unfortunate fate. Mercury appeared and asked him what was causing his tears. After the workman shared his tale of woe, Mercury plunged into the stream, emerging moments later with a golden axe in hand. "Is this the axe you lost?" he inquired. Upon hearing that it was not his, Mercury vanished beneath the water once more, returning with a silver axe in his hands. He again asked the man if this was his. When the man insisted it wasn't, Mercury dove into the pool for a third time and emerged with the workman's lost axe. The man joyfully claimed his axe and expressed his gratitude for its return. Pleased with the workman's honesty, Mercury also gifted him the golden and silver axes. When the workman returned home, he eagerly shared his extraordinary tale with his friends. Inspired. Inspired. One of them decided to seek the same fortune for himself. He hurried to the river, deliberately threw his axe into the same deep pool, and sat on the bank, feigning tears. Mercury appeared, just as he had hoped. and after learning the reason for his sorrow, he dove into the stream, emerging with a golden axe. "Is this the axe you lost?" he asked. The workman snatched it up with greed, claiming that it was indeed the very axe he had lost. Mercury, displeased by his deceit, not only took back the golden axe, but also refused to retrieve the axe he had carelessly thrown into the water. Now, let me tell you about the peasant and the apple tree. Peasant had an apple tree in his garden that bore no fruit and only served as a refuge for sparrows and grasshoppers. Determined to cut it down, he took his axe in hand and delivered a strong blow to its roots. The grasshoppers and sparrows pleaded with him not to cut down the tree that provided them shelter, promising to sing for him and lighten his burdens if he spared it. Ignoring their pleas, he struck the tree a second and then a third time. But when he reached the hollow of the trunk, he discovered a hive full of honey. After tasting the sweet honeycomb, he tossed aside his axe and, viewing the tree as precious, began to care for it lovingly. Sometimes, it is self-interest that motivates people's actions. The two soldiers and the robber. Two soldiers traveling together were suddenly confronted by a robber. One soldier ran away in fear, while the other stood his ground, valiantly defending himself with his strong right hand. After subduing the robber, the timid companion returned, sword drawn, and proclaimed, "I'll have my turn now, and I'll make sure he knows who he has dared to attack." To this, the courageous soldier who had fought responded, "I only wish you had stood by me in that moment, even if it were just with your words, for they would have given me the courage to fight on, believing them to be true. But now, sheathe your sword and silence your tongue, for they will do us no good in this instance. Save your empty bravado for those who don't know your true self. Indeed, who have experienced how quickly you run away, know well that no trust can be placed in your valor." The shepherd and the sheep shepherd, driving his sheep to a wooded area, came upon an unusually large oak tree laden with acorns. Spreading his cloak beneath the branches, he climbed up into the tree and shook down the acorns. As the sheep feasted on the fallen acorns, they inadvertently frayed and tore his cloak. When the shepherd climbed down and saw the damage, he exclaimed, "You most ungrateful creatures, you provide wool to make garments for all other men, yet you destroyed the clothes of the one who feeds you." The trees under the protection of the gods, according to an ancient legend, a dotted dot. The gods chose certain trees to be under their special protection. Jupiter chose the oak, Venus the myrtle, Apollo the laurel, Cybele the pine, and Hercules the poplar. Minerva, curious about why they had favored trees that bore no fruit, inquired about their choice. Jupiter responded, "It is so we do not appear to covet the honor of the fruit." Minerva replied, However, one might say what they wish, but the olive is much dearer to me because of its fruit." Jupiter then said, "My daughter, you are rightly hailed as wise, for, unless our actions prove to be useful, the glory they bring is ultimately empty." The flea and the wrestler. Flea settled on the bare foot of a wrestler and bit him, prompting the man to call out loudly for Hercules' help. When the flea jumped onto his foot a second time, he groaned and exclaimed, "Hercules, if you will not assist me against a flea, how can possibly expect your help against greater foes?" The lion and the fox entered into partnership with a lion under the pretense of becoming his servant. Each took on their responsibilities according to their own nature and abilities. The fox identified and pointed out the prey, while the lion pounced and seized it. The fox soon became envious of the lion, taking the larger share of the spoils. He declared that he would no longer help in locating the prey, but would hunt for his own. The very next day, while the lion pounced and seized it, but instead, he fell victim to the huntsmen and their dogs. Truth and the traveler. Wayfarer journeying through the desert came across a woman standing alone, looking utterly disheartened. He asked her, "Who are you? My name is Truth, she replied. And what brings you out here, away from the city? He inquired. She answered, In times gone by, falsehood was rare, but now it prevails among all people. The manslayer. Man committed a murder and found himself being pursued by the relatives of his victim. As he approached the banks of the Nile River, he spotted a lion nearby and, filled with terror, quickly climbed a tree. The ass struggled and kicked, trying to break free. But the driver shouted, Stop, you foolish creature. Are you really trying to throw yourself over the edge? Don't you see the danger? Just then, while the ass paused momentarily, realizing the edge was too steep. With reluctance, he stopped his frantic movements, understanding that sometimes a moment of reflection can save one from peril. The wise fox. In a forest, a fox came upon a hungry crow with a piece of cheese in her beak. The fox, crafty and clever, devised a plan to gain the cheese. He began to flatter the crow, saying, "Oh, beautiful crow, with feathers that shimmer like the stars, your voice must be as enchanting as your appearance. Would you sing for me?" Flattered by the fox's words, the crow opened her beak to sing, and as she did, the cheese fell to the ground. The fox quickly snatched it up and ran away, leaving the crow to reflect on the folly of being swayed by flattery. The lesson: always be wary of those who seek to manipulate your pride for their own gain. When the ass continued his stubborn efforts, the man released him and said, "Conquer, but conquer at your own expense." The thrush and the fowler. Thrush was enjoying the delightful berries of a myrtle tree and refused to leave because of their enticing flavor. Fowler, noticing her linger for so long in one place, skillfully coated his reeds with birdlime and caught her. As the thrush faced her impending doom, she lamented, "Oh, what a foolish creature am! For the sake of a little tasty food, have sacrificed my life." The mother and the wolf. Starving wolf roamed about in the morning, searching for food. As he passed a cottage nestled in the forest, he overheard a mother speaking to her child, "Be quiet, or we'll throw you out of the window, and the wolf shall eat you." The wolf lingered at the door all day, eagerly waiting. By evening, he heard the same woman tenderly soothing her child, saying, "Oh, how foolish I am! For the sake of a little tasty food, have sacrificed my life." The mother and the wolf. Starving wolf wandered through the morning, searching for any scraps to eat. As he passed by a cottage nestled in the forest, he overheard a mother speaking to her child, "Be quiet, or we'll throw you out of the window, and the wolf shall eat you." The wolf lingered at the door all day, eagerly waiting. By evening, he heard the same woman gently soothing her child, saying, "You are quiet now, and if the wolf should come, we will kill him." Hearing these words, the wolf went home, gasping from the cold and hunger. When he reached his den, Mistress Wolf asked him why he had returned exhausted and without supper, which was so unlike him. He replied, "Why indeed? Put my faith in the words of a woman." The hen and the swallow. Hen discovered the eggs of a viper and, nurturing them with great care, successfully brought them to life. Swallow, watching from nearby, exclaimed, "You silly creature, why have you hatched these vipers, which, once grown, will only bring harm to all, starting with you?" The rose and the amaranth. An amaranth, planted in a garden near a rose tree, addressed it with admiration. "What a lovely flower the rose is, adored by both gods and men. Envy you your beauty and your fragrance." The rose replied, "Jules say, indeed, dear amaranth, flourish only for a brief season. Even if a cruel hand does not pluck me from my stem, must inevitably meet an early demise." The horse replied, "Why should share my food with you? You do nothing but laze about and take advantage of others." The ass pleaded, "May not possess your strength or speed, but can carry burdens that you find taxing." Just then, ... May then, a farmer passed by and noticed the ass laboring under a heavy load. This poor creature works hard for a meager meal. ... Realizing the value of the ass's contributions, had a change of heart and said, perhaps was too hasty in my judgment. Every creature has its worth, even if it is not immediately apparent. This is a reminder that sometimes, we underestimate the value of those around us based on their occurrences or abilities. Yes, said the horse. If there's any left over from what I'm eating now, I'll give it to you, only out of respect for my own superior dignity. And if you come to my stall in the evening, I will give you a little sack full of barley. The ass replied, Thank you, but find it hard to believe that you, who refuse me a small favor now, will offer me a greater benefit later. The crow and the sheep, troublesome crow, settled on the back of a sheep. The sheep, much against its will, carried her around for a long time before finally saying, If you treated a dog like this, you wouldn't escape his sharp teeth. To this, the crow replied, Despise the weak and cater to the strong. Know whom can bully and whom must flatter. And that's how ensure live to a ripe old age. The Fox and the Bramble. Fox was climbing over a hedge when he lost his footing and grabbed hold of a bramble to save himself. The Lion grew tired of listening to Jupiter's endless grievances. So, in a fit of impatience, and that's how Jupiter finally decided to take action. He summoned the elephant to put an end to the complaints and restore some order. The elephant, with his great strength and towering presence, right in the elephant, ready to lend a hand. But just as the elephant was about to intervene, the lion, realizing his own folly, paused and reconsidered his approach. Perhaps, he mused, there's a better way to handle my problems rather than burdening others with them. In that moment of reflection, the lion learned that sometimes it's best to confront our difficulties ourselves rather than seeking out others to bear the weight of our troubles. It is true, Jupiter, he said. I am immense in strength, striking in appearance, and fierce in attack. My jaws are equipped with powerful teeth, and my feet are armed with sharp claws. Reign over all the beasts of the forest. And yet, it is a disgrace that someone like me should be frightened by the crowing of a mere cock. Jupiter replied, Why do you blame me without reason? Have bestowed upon you all the qualities that possess myself, and your courage fails you only in this one instance. Hearing this, the lion groaned deeply, lamenting his perceived cowardice and wishing for death. As these distressing thoughts swirled in his mind, he happened upon an elephant and approached him for a conversation. After some time, the lion noticed the elephant shaking his ears repeatedly and asked, What troubles you? Why do your ears tremble so often? Just then, a gnat landed on the elephant's head, prompting him to say, Do you see that tiny, buzzing insect? If it flies into my ear, my fate is sealed, would die at once. The lion replied, Well, if such a massive creature fears a mere gnat. Just then, a gnat landed on the elephant's head and approached him for a conversation. Shall no longer complain or wish for my own demise. Realize now that I am far better off than the elephant, even as I am. Now, let me tell you about the dog and the oyster. Dog, accustomed to eating eggs, spotted an oyster and, with his mouth wide open, gulped it down with great delight, mistaking it for an egg. But before long, he was overcome with immense pain in his stomach and lamented, Also, have brought this torment upon myself by foolishly believing that everything round must be an egg. Those who act without sufficient thought often find themselves in unexpected peril. Next, we have 2 mules, heavily laden with packs, making their way along a path. One mule carried panniers filled with money, while the other bore sacks laden with grain. The mule carrying the treasure walked with his head held high, as if aware of the worth of his load, talking, the clear-toned bells around his neck jingling with each step. His companion followed with a calm and steady gait. Suddenly, robbers sprang from their hiding places. 2 town streets in China kicked at them. The mule carrying the treasure was wounded by a sword as the thieves greedily seized the gold, entirely ignoring the sacks of grain. The wounded mule, lamenting his misfortune, cried out in despair. The other mule, untouched and unscathed, replied, "I am truly thankful to have been regarded so little, for have lost nothing and have not suffered any wounds. Now, let us turn to the tale of the lamb and the wolf." Wolf was in pursuit of a lamb, which desperately fled for refuge to a certain temple. The wolf called out to the lamb, saying, "If the priest catches you, he will sacrifice you." To this, the lamb responded, "I would rather be sacrificed in the temple than be devoured by you." Now, let us move on to the story of the partridge and the fowler. Fowler had captured a partridge and was preparing to kill it. The partridge earnestly pleaded for his life, saying, "Please lead me many partridges to your mercy in return for your mercy." The fowler replied, calling out to him without hesitation, "For you are willing to save yourself at the expense of betraying your friends and family." The flea and the man. One day, a man, thoroughly annoyed by a flea, finally caught it and said, "Who do you think you are, daring to feed on my flesh and causing me so much trouble in trying to catch you?" The flea replied, "Oh, dear sir, beg you, oh sir, spare my life and do not destroy me, for cannot do you much harm." The man laughed and answered, "You shall certainly die by my hand, for no evil, whether great or small, should be tolerated." The rich man and the tanner. Wealthy man lived near a tanner, and unable to endure the unpleasant stench coming from the tanner's yard, he urged his neighbor to leave. The thorn pierced his paw, causing him great pain. As he limped through the woods, he came across a shepherd tending his flock. The lion, in need of help, approached the shepherd and begged him to remove the thorn. The shepherd, terrified at the sight of the ferocious beast, trembled and replied, "Mighty lion, why should risk my life for you? You are a fierce predator, and am just a humble shepherd." The lion replied, "Consider this, dear shepherd, may be a lion, but I am also in distress. Mean no harm to you. Simply seek your assistance." Moved by the lion's honesty, the shepherd hesitated, but eventually agreed to help. Carefully, he removed the thorn from the lion's paw. Grateful for the shepherd's kindness, the lion promised, "I will not harm you for your good deed. Instead, I will protect you from any danger that may arise." The shepherd, realizing that even the most fearsome creatures can be noble, learned that acts of kindness can bridge the greatest divides. The moral of the story: it's often the smallest gestures of kindness that yield the greatest rewards. Soon afterward, he approached a shepherd, fawning over him and wagging his tail as if to say, "I am a supplicant, and seek your help." The shepherd, showing great courage, examined the creature, found the thorn, and gently pulled it out, placing the lion's paw on his lap. Relieved of his pain, the lion returned to the forest. Some time later, the shepherd found himself wrongfully imprisoned, condemned to be thrown to the lions as punishment for a crime he didn't commit. Yet, when the lion was released from his cage, he recognized the shepherd, the very man who had healed him. Instead of attacking, he approached the shepherd and placed his foot on his lap in a gesture of gratitude. When the king learned of this tale, he ordered the lion to be set free again in the forest and granted the shepherd a pardon, restoring him to his friends. Not far away, the camel, upon seeing the bull adorned with impressive horns, felt a pang of envy and wished for horns of his own. He went to Jupiter and pleaded with him to grant his wish. Jupiter, annoyed by the camel's request, meant that it was ungrateful for him to be dissatisfied with his own size and strength. He not only refused to go at the camel horns, but in a fit of anger, he even took away part of his ears. Meanwhile, a panther had fallen into a pit due to a twist of fate. The shepherds discovered him there. Some began to throw sticks and stones at him, while others, moved by compassion for a creature on the brink of death, chose to toss in some food to extend his life. At night, the shepherds returned home, unaware of the danger that awaited them, or thinking they would find the panther dead by morning. But the panther, having regained some of his strength, made sudden leap from the pit and hurried back to his den. A few days later, he emerged, wreaking havoc on the livestock and exacting revenge on the shepherds who had attacked him, filled with furious wrath. Then, those who had spared his life, fearing for their safety, surrendered their flocks to him and pleaded only for their lives. To them, the panther replied, "Remember, both those who sought my life with stones and those who offered me food. Therefore, your fears are misplaced. Return as an enemy only to those who harmed me." The eagle and the kite. An eagle, overwhelmed with sorrow, perched on the branches of a tree alongside a kite. "Why," asked the kite, "do you look so sorrowful?" "I am searching," the eagle replied, "for a mate who is worthy of me, but cannot find one." "Ake me," the kite responded, "for I'm much stronger than you." "Is that so? Can you provide for yourself through your plunder?" "Indeed, I have often caught and carried away an ostrich in my talons." The eagle, convinced by these words, accepted him as her mate. Shortly after their wedding, the eagle said, "Fly off and bring me back the ostrich you promised me." The kite, "Fly off and bring me back the ostrich." Soaring high into the sky, WWW returned with the most pitiful mouse, reeking from the time it had spent lying in the fields. "Is this," asked the eagle, "the faithful fulfillment of your promise?" The kite replied, "For the chance to win your royal hand would have promised you anything, even knowing would fail to deliver." Once, an eagle was captured by a man who immediately clipped his wings and imprisoned him in a poultry yard with the other birds. This treatment filled the eagle with deep sorrow. Eventually, a neighbor purchased him and allowed his feathers to grow back. The moment the eagle took flight again, he pounced on a hare and returned with it as a gift for his benefactor. As the fox observed this, he said, "Don't seek the favor of this man. Rather, seek the favor of your former owner. Otherwise, he might come hunting for you and rob you of your wings once more." The king's son, who was passionate about martial exercises, was plagued by a troubling dream. In it, he was warned that a lion would kill him. Terrified of this foretold fate, the king constructed a delightful palace for his son, adorning the walls with life-size depictions of various animals, among which was the image of a lion. Upon seeing the lion's picture, the young prince's sorrow returned, and he stood by the depiction, exclaiming, "You wretched creature, because of a false dream that my father had while asleep. I'm confined to this palace like a girl, all because of you. What shall I do to you now?" With that, he reached out toward a thorn tree, intending to cut a stick from its branches to strike the lion. But one of the tree's thorns pricked his finger, causing excruciating pain and inflammation, and the young prince collapsed in a faint. Fierce fever struck him suddenly, and he succumbed not many days later. It is better to face our troubles with courage than to try to flee from them. The cat and Venus cat fell in love with a handsome young man and implored Venus to transform her into a woman. Venus granted her wish and turned her into a stunning maiden, so that the young man saw her, fell in love, and took her home as his bride. While the two of them were reclining in their room, Venus, do you want to hear it? Curious to discover whether the cat had changed her habits along with her appearance, Venus dropped a mouse in the middle of the room. The cat, entirely forgetting her new form, leaped off the couch and chased after the mouse, eager to catch it. Venus was greatly disappointed and promptly reverted her back to her original form. Nature surpasses nurture. The eagle and the beetle. The eagle and the beetle were sworn enemies. each determined to destroy the other's nests. It all began when the eagle, in an act of aggression, seized the beetle's young and devoured them. In retaliation, the beetle, using stealth, which seized the young beetle, managed to find and roll the eagle's eggs out of its nest. Driven by spite, the beetle even followed the eagle all the way to the presence of Jupiter himself. When the eagle brought its grievances before Jupiter, the god, in an act of resolving the conflict, instructed the eagle to build its nest in his lap. As Jupiter held the eggs there, the beetle buzzed around him persistently. Unbeknownst to the god, as he attempted to swat the beetle away from his head, he inadvertently knocked the eggs to the ground, breaking them in the process. This tale reminds us that the weak often find ways to avenge themselves against those who mistreat them, even when their oppressors hold greater power. The she-goats and their beards. Once, the she-goats approached Jupiter with a request. They desired beards for themselves. However, this request caused great discontent among the he-goats, who were outraged that the females would now share in their dignity and status. "Let them," Jupiter said, "enjoy a hollow honor and don the insignia of your nobler sex, as long as they do not match you in strength or courage. It matters little if those who are inferior to us in merit wish to resemble us in outward appearance." The bald man and the fly bit the bare head of a bald man who, in an attempt to swat it away, landed a heavy slap on himself. As the fly escaped, it taunted, "You, who wanted to take revenge, even to the point of death," etc. For the prick of a tiny insect, look what you've done to yourself in adding insult to injury. The bald man replied, "Can easily come to terms with myself, knowing I'm satisfied and guarantee one thing. But you, an ugly and despicable insect who revels in sucking human blood, how wish could have killed you, even if it meant facing a harsher consequence." The shipwrecked man and the sea. Shipwrecked man, both, having been cast upon a desolate shore, fell asleep after his tumultuous struggles with the sea. After a while, he awoke, gazing at the sea, filled it with reproaches. He argued that it lured men in with its calm appearance, only to grow turbulent and destroy them once they ventured into its waters. The sea, taking on the form of a woman, responded to him, "Do not blame me, dear sir, dear sir. Nonetheless, but the winds. By my very nature, I am as calm and steadfast as the earth beneath your feet. But, however, when the winds strike me, they generate these waves and provoke my fury." The buffoon and the countryman. Once upon a time, a wealthy nobleman opened the theaters to the public free of charge and announced that he would generously reward anyone who could present a new form of entertainment for the occasion. Various performers vied for the prize, among them a buffoon well known for his jokes. He claimed to have an entertainment act that had never been seen on any stage before. This claim garnered much attention. Now, the theater filled to capacity. The buffoon took his place on the stage, exuding confidence, while the countryman stood by, somewhat anxious but resolved. As the crowd buzzed with excitement, the buffoon began his act once again. He leaned over dramatically and once more mimicked the squealing of a little pig. The audience erupted in laughter and applause, reeling from his comedic timing and talent. Then it was the countryman's turn. Taking a deep breath to steady himself, he stepped forward, his heart racing. With a confident expression, he bent toward his chest and attempted to replicate the pig's squeal. However, instead of the expected cute oink, his performance came out more like a gruff grunt, catching the crowd off guard. Laughter erupted, but not in the supportive way he had hoped for. The audience, already biased towards the buffoon, delighted in the countryman's misstep, their laughter ringing out like a chorus. He felt their jeers pierce through him as he struggled to recover. Determined, he tried again, adjusting his technique and putting forth his utmost effort to produce a more fitting sound. Yet, even with his persistence, the results were less than satisfactory. The crowd continued to chuckle, not out of admiration, but rather at his expense. With palpable disappointment, the countryman realized that his attempt to outshine the talented buffoon had only served to amplify his errors. As the scene unfolded, the audience's amusement turned into a spectacle of ridicule, overshadowing the very talent he had hoped to showcase. The buffoon grunted and squeaked his way onto the stage first, earning once again the applause and cheers of the audience. Then it was the countryman's turn. He pretended to conceal a little pig beneath his clothes and cleverly tugged on his ear, prompting the pig to squeak. However, the crowd united in their cries, declaring that the buffoon had delivered a far more convincing imitation and demanded that the countryman be thrown out of the theater. In response, the rustic pulled the pig from his cloak, presenting undeniable evidence of their error. "Look here," he said. "This proves what kind of judges you truly are." Nearby, a crow, desperately in search of food, spotted a serpent sleeping in a sunny corner. With a greedy swoop, the crow flew down and seized the serpent. However, the serpent, awakening abruptly, turned and bit the crow, inflicting a mortal wound. In his final moments, the bird lamented, "Unhappy me. Look at you," said the olive tree, "always with your bare branches in the winter, while remain lush and vibrant throughout the year." The fig tree responded, "Your eternal greenery may seem a blessing, but it hides a truth. May shed my leaves, but bear the sweetest fruit in due season. What good is your constant foliage if it does not bring forth nourishment?" Thus, the fig tree reminded the olive tree that true worth lies not in appearances, but in the value one brings to others. Shower of snow gracefully descended upon them, settling on the olive tree, heavy with foliage. The weight of the snow caused its branches to bend and break, stripping it of its beauty and ultimately bringing about its demise. In stark contrast, the fig tree, bare of leaves, allowed the snow to fall harmlessly to the ground without sustaining any damage. The frog's complaint against the sun. Once upon a time, when the sun declared his intention to take a wife, the frogs raised their voices in protest to the heavens. Jupiter, disturbed by the ruckus of their croaking, asked what was amiss. One of the frogs spoke up, saying, "While the sun is a man single, he scorches our marsh and forces us to perish in our dry homes. What will become of us if he produces more sons?" The brazier and his dog. Brazier had a little dog that was a great favorite with his master and accompanied him everywhere he went. As he toiled away at his metals, the dog would sleep peacefully by his side. But when mealtime came and his master sat down to eat, the dog would spring to life, wagging his tail eagerly, as if to signal that he was ready for a share of the meal. One day, feigning anger and shaking his stick at the dog, his master exclaimed, "You lazy little creature, what am to do with you? While hammer away on the anvil, you snooze contentedly on the mat, and only when sit down to eat after my hard work do you wake up, wagging your tail for food. Don't you realize that labor is the foundation of all blessings and that only those who work deserve to eat?" And that was that. Thank you for listening on Audiobook Heritage. Subscribe for more timeless classics.